All right, are we all mostly good to go? Good. All right, Robert, I'm good if you would like to call the meeting to order.
I'll now call to order this special meeting of the Jersey City Historic Preservation Commission. It is March 26th, about 6:35 p.m.
Okay. Please be advised that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice of the time, date, and place of this special meeting of the Jersey City Historic Preservation Commission has been sent to the Jersey Journal, Jersey City Reporter, and Ellis Basilito on March 13th and published as a legal notice on Tuesday, March 19th. Same notice has been sent to the city clerk for posting on the bulletin board outside of the clerk's office in City Hall and on the Jersey City website. I have proofs of this notice in evidence, which we can mark. And I will slow down. Great. All right, we will move to roll call attendance. No problem. All right, Commissioner Sankamp,
Here.
Commissioner Gunther,
Here.
Commissioner Lewis,
Present.
Commissioner Blazak,
Present.
Commissioner Cronin,
Here.
Commissioner Amatuzo is absent, Commissioner Garriga is absent, Commissioner Sakong is absent, Vice Chair Gucciardo,
Here.
and Chairman Gordon.
Present.
Okay, there are 7 members of the commission in attendance tonight. 5 affirmative votes are needed for a certificate of appropriateness. All right, there are 2 items on the agenda. If you'd like to call the first case, I believe, Chuck, you're presenting as one, right? That's correct. All right, so we'll just call the first case and hear the presentation for both.
I'm calling both cases on the agenda for the evening, which are H-23-183 and H-23-184. The applicant is Jennifer Bogdansky, Esquire, on behalf of Temple Beth El, owner. The address is 2419 John F. Kennedy Boulevard.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners.
Chuck, I'm sorry, can you just turn on that mic? You just got to tap it. No, the bottom, yeah, where it says push.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, Charles Harrington of Connell Foley on behalf of the applicant in place of Ms. Bogdansky. And thank you, Commissioners. As you recall, we were before the Commission back on February 5th, so a little over a month and a half ago, presenting both of these applications with regard to the proposed canopies and fencings on the Temple Bethel building. As you may recall, we carried the meeting because there were some open questions and concerns from the Commission that we were asked to take another look at. We have taken this time to make some tweaks and changes and updates to the plans. And tonight we also have our civil engineer here tonight that can address the drainage and rain issues that were raised by the Commission. I also have Scott Doyle, which is our historic expert, that he can. We intend at the end to kind of wrap it up to kind of get his opinion. He's the author of the Heritage Report that was presented to the Commission. And I also will be providing the testimony of Stuart Portney. He is on the safety task force at the Temple. I think that's because of the reasoning for what we're proposing tonight. We think that's relevant for the Commission to hear, real world factual analysis or that Mr. Portney has been facing. So what I would like to do initially here is have Mr. Zinder come up. He's the architect of record that was here in February. He's going to take you through again the application, not again, but kind of highlight, what has changed and what was proposed. Some changes have been made upon a recommendation of the commission at the last meeting. And then we'll move into the engineer, then Mr. Portney, and then Mr. Doyle.
Good
Raise
evening.
your right hand if you sworn.
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And could you state and spell your full name for the record?
My name is Joshua Zinder. That's Joshua Zinder. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us back to provide further clarification. And our fence just fell over. To provide further clarification on the 2419 JFK Boulevard property, the two applications for Temple Bethel. As you recall, there are two projects that are needed for different reasons, which are beyond the congregation's control here. The presentation, as was before, will be in 4 parts. I will try to go through some of the images quicker that we've seen before, but all of the images you'll see here have been updated. The first part we'll refer to as Exhibit A, which is general information. The second part will be referred to as Exhibit D, which are the new canopies. The third, Exhibit E, which is related to security fencing. And finally, we'll show you both of the elements together. We'd like you to approve both projects. However, we will request that the committee consider them separately, so one does not impede the approval of the other. Here you see the West Bergen East Lincoln Park Historic District, with the property highlighted within it. Zooming in closer, here you see it on the tax map. Here's the site survey of the property, and here we've highlighted those existing light fixtures that are on the building and what areas they illuminate. For the most part, they do not really illuminate the areaways themselves. They illuminate the areas beyond. So now on page 5, here you see the building from above with its iconic gold terracotta roof and the open yard extending to Bentley Avenue. The building, as we spoke about previously, was designed in 1925 in a Byzantine Revival style and built in 1926 by architect Percy Vivardis. There were many adjustments to this original design from this concept, but the overall intent was maintained, and we covered those differences last time, so I won't get into them. Here is the Byzantine Revival building today, as seen from JFK, with its red brick facade, contrasting terracotta accents, and stone base, and stained glass windows. Before we get into the specifics of the project, there are a series of questions that were raised previously that need to be addressed. As I mentioned, there are 2 different projects being considered for these areaways, which are egress access from the social level, to allow for social egress access from the social hall level of the building. And this is Exhibit D we'll be discussing, the new canopies which divert the water. So during Superstorm Ida, which was September 1st through the 3rd in 2021, Bethel suffered extreme damage, and FEMA is helping rebuild from this damage. The loss of their social hall space dramatically limits the space the congregation can have for classes and special events. Part of the work which FEMA is looking for is mitigation to ensure that if a similar storm event happens, the building will not suffer the same type of damage. The existing drains, one of the questions that came out previously was, where are the drains, where do they go, how do they work? So the existing drains run through the building, actually, then they run out to the sewer system. The drain system was overwhelmed by the storm during Ida, and as mentioned, the congregation is receiving a grant for the restoration of their social hall, but also for these mitigation efforts. And as part of this, we have, they've made sure the pipes were flushed out, and they also ran cameras through all the pipes, tracing them back to from their source all the way to where they discharged. In normal conditions, another thing that was asked was the amount of water. So in normal conditions, there are about 145 gallons a minute that can go through these drains. This is generated from the area above the areaways, and the rain that hits the facades and cascades down into the areaways. The addition of the canopies will divert this water from the drains and away from the building. The south leader will divert 68 gallons per minute. The north canopy will divert 77 gallons per minute. We have sized the gutters at 3 inches by 5 inches, which should handle up to 157 gallons per minute, so well above what we're, 157 gallons per minute, well above what the canopies will be taking. The 4-inch leader that will be collecting the water can handle up to 144 gallons per minute. These calculations are based on New Jersey Plumbing Code. These elements will ensure the future flooding events will be mitigated. Bless you. This will be further reviewed by our civil engineer later. And just to add, some of this data was provided for us by our plumbing engineer, Loring Consulting Engineering. In addition to the water questions, we've also further clarified our details from the comments at the last presentation, with the specific goals that if these elements can be removed in the future, the architectural integrity of the historic structure will be maintained. We will be anchoring only into the mortar joints as to not damage any of the brick. We have detailed that top portion. We've detailed the top portion of the canopy so that it ensures that it'll be, including the flashing, will be placed below a full brick course. In addition, we have inserted a hinge within the structure to ensure that the pitch of the gutter is maintained and will allow for proper drainage of the gutter to the leaders. The gutter is also integral to the structure. From a design point of view, we felt it was better, cleaner, simpler, and its size, as we previously discussed. The anchor points for the cables have been located above the windows to ensure that they do not impair the structure, and this has been reviewed with our structural engineer as well. Here's the location of the first canopy on Harrison Street and the second canopy that faces Bentley. Here you see the canopies in plan. The plan on the right is the plan of the social hall that was damaged in the flood. The first floor plan on the left with the canopies highlighted in blue. Here are the full building elevations with the canopies shaded in blue. Well, I don't know if it's hard to see, but they are sort of shaded in blue. We placed the canopies on the facade in the gap above the base element and below the first floor windows. Please note that due to the grade change on the north versus the south side, each of the canopies are a different elevation relative to the ground, despite their common height elevation on the building. And this was also discussed, and I'll bring up a little bit later a clarification with regard to the height versus fence differential. Taking a closer look at each of the canopies, we can see that they are located above the stone base of the building and low enough on the facade for a complete flashing to occur below the windows and have a full brick course above them. The canopies are simple structures pitched to allow drainage away from the building with rod stays to allow the structure to be thinner and lighter. You can also see the difference in relative grade on the north and south side of the buildings. The intent of the canopies, we plan to paint them black with metal shingles in a lighter, it's anchor gray, and so here's a sample of the black color, and here's a sample of the anchor gray. And just for a point of reference,
Gotta talk into the mic. Okay. I'll hold them up though.
for point of reference, we've included a zinc sample. That's just for a color. We've matched that with the roofing that we are going to be using. And also on the floor here, we have full-size samples of the metal shingles that we plan to use, the diamond pattern shingles, as I mentioned before. It's not the right color, but it does show you how they're seamless and how they interlock. In looking at the details and elevations of the canopies, you can see we comply with your design standards and guidelines in addition to the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, while still providing the necessary FEMA mitigation effort. The structure is modern in form and exposed beams and purlins and a diamond pattern metal shingles.
Slow down a little.
Sorry.
The structure is modern in form and
The structure is modern in form with the exposed beams and purlins and a diamond pattern metal shingle. There are also concealed lights integrated into the structure as well to illuminate the areaways. The cut sheet is on the bottom right of this slide. So you can see it's just a simple black colored tube. We've brought some metal samples which are going around for reference. The black for the structure, the zinc colors for the roofing. The water is collected in the gutters and then down the leaders into the drainage system, which the civil engineer will review shortly. And then similar on the north side, when looking at the plan on the bottom, you can see the red dots. Those red dots represent where the lights will be going, and that'll provide illumination for the areaways. Now we have a series of images, some which might be familiar to you. This is the exterior of the building, looking at the Harrison Street side, and then with the canopy, a closer condition, and with the canopy. It is important to note that these areaways act as bathtubs, and despite the new drainage, we are adding these canopies as a best practice to divert the water away from the areaways and to ensure proper mitigation from storms. Here you see, this is a view that we didn't have previously, but we wanted to show it to you to give a better understanding of what the canopies were going to look like. And then you have, here's the installed with the canopy. Previously, there was a discussion about whether the existing rails should be painted black or kept as green. We are currently planning to have them in black, which we will show here and a number of other times. Please note our renderings and the images that we show on the north side of the building are without leaves on the trees, and in winter, so that you could better see our proposal. However, you should note that the north side of this building is screened and is shaded for much of the year. So here you see some other images. And then from Bentley, it is actually a great distance away, so the awning would actually be quite a distance to actually see it in the shadow. Now you see here's the existing north side of the building, and that same view with the canopy, the existing yard view from across the yard, and with the canopy, and then the existing areaway up close, and again with the canopy. Again, these are necessary to divert the water. The canopies are at a very shallow angle to allow for proper pitch, and at the same time exist in the gap between the underside of the windows and the base course. It's also worth noting here that that we have, well, I'll come back to it in a minute about the difference between the fence and the canopy. Now we're going to shift to the proposed security fences. The congregation has received a Homeland Security grant for these fences. Regretfully, the world we live in today, concealed locations around places of worship afford opportunities for people with malicious intent. In addition, the congregation has been struggling with individuals using these areaways as restrooms, locations to do drugs and other unsavory activities. Now I'm going to take you through the Exhibit E. Here you see the fence on the Harrison side and the fence in blue on the Bentley side. During the last presentation, there were questions about safety and incidents. There are frequent incidents of trash, clothing, syringes, needles, and human waste in these areaways. In addition to people found sleeping there, there have been numerous other incidents that have left the congregants and the community members feeling unsafe. Regretfully, the health and crime issues are not the only thing the congregation is facing and contending with. The world in which we live is filled with turmoil, and New Jersey and Jersey City are in the middle of it. The number of anti-Semitic incidents over the last few years has been steadily on the rise, including major hate crimes within a short distance of the congregation. As we mentioned last time, Bethel received a Homeland Security grant to strengthen the safety of the building. Homeland Security provides guidelines and directions on mitigating these threats. The first step in that grant process is a comprehensive vulnerability assessment or target hardening analysis, which was completed and certified by Michael Boyle. The study, specifically notes the addition of fences and gates to protect the congregation and the areaways. This was part of what was submitted to Homeland Security that helped the congregation access the grant. The effort has been more than 2 years in the making to secure this property. Here you can see the plans where the fences will go around the areaways, dotted in red. The elevation of the building with the new security fences in place. Here you see the closer elevations with the security fences. The fences we are planning to use are black aluminum picket fence with pinched pickets and flat caps on the posts. So we weren't able to get a post for today, but here you can see what the fence will look like. As the areaways and stairs required for egress, we'll also have panic bars on the fences, on the gates. This will necessitate the application of a 3/4 inch mesh on the side of the fencing around the gates to prevent people from reaching around it to activate the panic devices. Now, if we go back to the Harrison Street view, and here you see it with the fence, the view up close, and with the security fence, you will note that the intent is to keep the historic railing just inside the fencing to maintain the integrity of that historic element. And the new view on Harrison, and then with the fence, and here you can see the gate as well. The existing north side of the building viewed from JFK. Please remember these views have no foliage, so everything is exposed. And with the security fence, and just going back between those two, it's very difficult to even see what the difference is. It was noted in the staff report online, excuse me, that was from, anyway, these fences really have a de minimis impact on the overall building and the overall structure, and they have no negative impact on the visual landscape, as you can see here, and safety is critical. The existing view from across the yard, and with the security fence, the existing conditions of the building up close, and with the new security fence. Here as well, you can see that we intend to keep the historic rail as noted before, locating the new fence just outside of it to maintain its integrity. Also, this is a good place to note the mesh around the gate. Here you can actually see it when you look at the floor just inside the gate. This will again prevent somebody from reaching in to activate the panic bar. We are asking you for approval of each of these items individually, as they're each tied to potential federal funding from FEMA and Homeland Security, but we recognize it's important to see them together. We are also aware that the combination of the two designs together raised some additional concerns at the committee meeting last time. So the remaining images will be composite of both elements. The congregation asked Heritage Consulting Group to review these proposals and their sensitivity to this key contributing structure. Their findings led them to note that both proposals met the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties and the local historic district guidelines as well. You'll hear from Scott Doyle from Heritage shortly. Here we see Harrison Avenue view of the diagram again with both elements, and the Bentley side with both elements. The existing Harrison Avenue view, and then with the fence and the canopy together. And then up close, the fence and canopy together. Please note that the leader, which will be tied to the stormwater, is actually at the very end of this image in the back left corner. Please remember that the structure of the canopy will be black. It's shown a little bit gray here so that we can have some clarity of detail as it disappears when we paint it all black. Here's the new view on Harrison Street again, and with the new canopy. We studied alternative colors for the canopy, a lighter titanium surface for the roofing material in color, and silver colors to help differentiate from the historic structure. And we also looked at red brackets instead of black and silver cables. However, all of these seem to attract more attention to these elements, and we felt they detracted from the historic building, so keeping them all muted and black and dark gray was the direction that we've gone. And so here you see that. Following the suggestion from the last meeting, We'll also be painting those rails black to help them better mesh with the overall design. And here you see the existing view from the north side of the building and both elements in view. The existing view from across the yard, and then with both elements. The existing view up close, and with both proposed elements. Please note that we listened to your concern from the last meeting and have lowered the height of the fence around the north areaway to 5 feet from its previous request of 6, increasing the gap between the two elements so they are less like a singular element and can be read independently and allow for visual access to the brick that's underneath the canopy. In conclusion, we believe our proposal for the canopies and security fences at Temple Bethel meet the requirements of your local historic district guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards. They will provide mitigation for extreme weather and help reduce security risks for the congregation and community moving into the future. These projects we are discussing tonight have little to no impact on the historic district, and I would suggest they have a net positive impact by creating a more resilient environment and a safer neighborhood. In addition, it is important to note that we recognize the world changes, and these proposed elements are reversible if the future permits. Our proposal is respectful to the historic district and the legacy of this key contributing building within it. Thank you for your time tonight. We hope you find the proposal compelling and approve it. Our engineer, Kelly Osuch, will be presenting next, followed by Scott Doyle from Heritage Consulting.
Thank you. Couple quick questions before we proceed. Are you proposing to paint the guardrail on both the north and south sides black?
Based on our previous conversation, we would say yes. However, if you prefer us to maintain the green in either locations, we would keep the green.
Okay.
That's less of an important factor for the congregation right now than having the fences and canopies in place.
And I believe you said that the fence would be aluminum. I saw in the Heritage report that there's a mention of alternatively using a steel fence material. Which one is it that you're proposing?
So we're proposing the aluminum. It was discussed previously that there was a preference by this committee for wrought iron. And with Heritage, we were going back and forth, and honestly, until the last minute, this is sort of the way it stayed. The congregation prefers to do the aluminum fence because it is more cost effective. However, if you will approve the fences and the canopies, if it is wrought iron, then they will do a wrought iron version of the same fence. Their preference is to spend less money, but if that's what it's going to take to get it approved, they will shift to wrought iron.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to move forward with our civil engineer, Kelly Osuch.
Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state and spell your full name for the record.
Kelly Osuch, Kelley, O''Such.
And Kelly, before we begin, can you give the commission the benefit of your professional and educational experience and advise if you're licensed in New Jersey?
Sure. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Virginia Tech. I graduated in 2012. And since 2012, I've been practicing in New Jersey as a civil engineer, designing drainage, stormwater, various land development projects throughout the state. I do have a valid professional engineering license in the state and have had it in good standing since 2018. And I've testified before various public boards in this capacity.
Staff recommends that chair accept qualifications as an expert in the field of engineering.
So accepted.
Okay, thank you. And just before you begin, for the record, you and your firm are the project civil engineers, is that correct?
Correct. We're the applicant's engineer. We designed the drainage associated with this project.
Okay, and And as part of that review, reviewed the proposed drainage, and if you could give the benefit of to the board of alternatives that you considered as well. You're going to present that as well?
Yeah, I'll go through the presentation and kind of explain what ultimately we're proposing and kind of the things we looked at potentially as alternates.
Okay, with that said, I'll let you take the floor.
Okay.
Kelly, before you start, I do just want to note I forgot to mark their presentation because it has changed from the last time. So, Bridge, if we could mark their presentation as B2.
In one moment, this will be B2 in evidence. No. It's
A1.
A2. I'm sorry, it would be A2 because the last presentation was A1.
A1, A2 in evidence.
Okay, good to go.
So I'll start off here, just kind of give you some background, existing conditions of the existing site. As Josh noted, the site is located along JFK Boulevard. So if you're looking at our plan here, JFK is towards the bottom, which is the eastern side of the project. Bentley Ave is to the north, Harrison Ave is to the south, and then there's residential properties to the east of the site. So just kind of get your orientation on the properties. It is block 17702, and it's two separate lots, lot 26 and lot 27 on the tax maps. Quickly running through, the site is located within the R3, RH1, and the West Bergen East Lincoln Park Historic District overlay, which is why we're obviously here before you. So generally looking at the image that's before you, there's a high point on the north side of the project, so along the Bentley Ave corridor, and the site generally drains towards the west or southwest towards Harrison Ave. And then the structure itself is kind of encompassing the southwestern portion of the entire property. The site is served by local public utilities, including a combined sewer system, public water, gas, and electric. So this image is just kind of blowing up or zooming in more on the area of the actual structure of the temple. The majority of my testimony is going to be regarding the site drainage or the building drainage directly around the structure. So we'd been brought in on the project with the understanding that there was ongoing drainage issues at the structure. So on February 20th, our office went out to the site to perform a site visit, and we also had the Jersey City MUA come with us to the site since the site is within the combined sewer system. So ultimately, it's their sanitary lines that we would be impacting or potentially impacting with any changes that we're proposing. Upon reviewing the site, we really focused in on these two areaways, as we're calling them. From reviewing the site, that's the area that appears to be causing the majority of the drainage issues. And namely because those areaways are uncovered and basically water can just fall or rainfall can just fall directly into those. At the bottom of the areaways, there's a 2-inch drain pipe on either side, so one 2-inch drain pipe on either side. And with those being completely uncovered over time, from rain events, as Josh noted, people kind of getting in there with hypodermic needles and other debris, there's been an ongoing issue where the pipes have clogged over time and blocked over time. And it's not necessarily a maintenance issue, that it's not covered, and the debris itself is actually getting washed into the pipes. So it's not being blocked out or diverted away from the pipes. It's getting into the pipes, and then eventually it starts to block up and clog up the pipes. Additionally, these 2-inch pipes, for any nominal storm event that would occur, so namely what we've been designing to as engineers lately is the 100-year storm event, these 2-inch pipes are completely undersized. They can handle up to, as we measure it in cubic feet per second, 0.06 cubic feet per second, which is extremely small amount of peak flow that can go into those. So basically, even if these were not clogged, operating great, they're still undersized pipes that are currently at the bottom of those areaways. So here's just an image along the Harrison Ave side of the building, and the areaway would be on the left-hand side of the screen. Harrison Ave would be on the right-hand side of the screen. And what I wanted to show here is it's not an issue of the sidewalk being properly or improperly graded. That water is running, if it lands on the sidewalk, it runs to Harrison Ave. It doesn't run into the areaway. So there is a positive drainage away from the areaway. So really the only water that's going into that areaway is coming from the sky directly. And you can see there's kind of a curb or a knee wall kind of built into that that also helps divert that water from falling into the areaway. Now this is on the Bentley Ave side. And again, you can kind of see there's a retaining wall on the right-hand side of the property and then a vegetated planter area. And again, the water is diverted away from that. And again, the only thing really going into that areaway is the water coming directly from above. This is just an image of what the drain currently looked like. And that was after I kicked and scraped and exposed the drain. So as you can see, over time, it is collecting a lot of dirt, debris. There was needles and other things in that area as well. And I also wanted to kind of bring up kind of the roof structure of the building as well. And as you can see, and I'll go through kind of a 360 angle here, that the existing structure does have a parapet, and that water is collected on the roof and then run to interior drains. So it's, again, it's not an issue of along the areaways of water running off the roof down into those. That water is all collected and run internally to the building. So again, directly at the areaways, the only water coming into it is directly from overhead. So what we propose to do is propose to install 2 canopies, one on either side, that cover the areaways. And the idea being, since those existing drain pipes are undersized, they've historically collected a lot of debris and ultimately started to fail over time, we're trying to divert that water from going down to those drains. The drains would still remain as kind of a fail-safe or an extra measure, but the water above would be diverted and run away from those areaways on any normal storm event. So specifically here on the Harrison Ave side, we have a proposed trench drain that would run across the sidewalk, and that would collect the roof leader coming off of the canopy, and it would discharge at the curb line. So basically it would come out and you would just see water running along the curb along Harrison Ave. This trench drain is designed as an 8-inch wide trench drain, and it's basically sized for up to and including a 100-year storm event for a peak flow that would be anticipated with that. And this is kind of the idea. The actual connection isn't exactly what we're looking at, but more to visualize what the trench drain across the sidewalk would look like and kind of at the curb line, how it would discharge. On the Bentley Ave side, we are proposing to, again, capture the roof area, divert it from the internal plumbing that it's currently going through. And this side, we're actually proposing to install a subsurface infiltration device, or a dry well is what we're calling it. And that dry well device would capture up to a 9-inch storm event over that new canopy area and infiltrate it into the ground. So ultimately, if those existing drains were operating properly, this water would be going into the combined sewer system. Now we're taking up to 9 inches of rainfall for this area and pulling it out of the city's storm sewer, combined sewer system. And this is just kind of an image of what the the dry well would typically look like. So you're capturing the roof area or the canopy area on a roof leader. It runs underground through a pipe into basically a big stone pit, and then it eventually infiltrates into the ground from there. So kind of going through numbers, I kind of touched on some of them, but I'll try to explain it a little bit better. So Harrison Ave, that canopy is approximately 270 square feet. So for a 100-year storm flow event, you're looking at plus or minus 0.05 CFS. And then the trench drain capacity itself to handle that peak flow is sized to handle up to 2.5 CFS. So it's grossly oversized. It can handle the large storm events and divert that water adequately without hopefully impacting anything on the structure itself.
Sorry, does that include, maybe you were about to get to this, the leader, or is that a bottleneck?
The leader itself is a 6-inch leader is what we're proposing coming, or I think you said 3 by 5, is that?
Well, the leader is four by four.
I'm sorry, I have an unidentified speaker here.
Sorry.
I can't see you. Repeat.
Sorry, the gutter is 3 inches by 5 inches that leads to a leader that is 4 inches by 4 inches. It's a 4-inch leader coming down, which handles 144 gallons per minute. I don't know how that translates into CFS, but
Yeah.
it was more than double what the canopy was going to be putting off, and I believe it's a fraction of what you've calculated here.
Correct.
So would that, in terms of CFS, accommodate this 100-year storm flow?
Yeah, so the 100-year storm flow for that roof area is 0.05 CFS. The roof leader itself is oversized, and then the trench drain capacity itself is oversized. And again, the trench drain's running across the sidewalk, so it's also going to pick up some overland flow from the sidewalk and push that back into the road as well. So then on-
Sorry, just before we move on, can you just clarify what you're talking about as grossly oversized?
So, yeah, so we're using the trench drain only comes in a certain size, right? We're trying to pick something that is size greater than the 100-year storm event because we know that we're getting those more often than the 1% that it's supposed to happen. So we're trying to design a conveyance system that has capacity for at least the 100-year storm event. So we go to what the nominal sizes are of these trench drains, and they have them in real small sizes of 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, and the one that we're proposing is an 8-inch, so that it's more than enough for this proposed use to make sure that we don't have any backup issues and the water can get back out to the road. Is that, sorry, I'm trying to.
Yes, I think that explains
Okay.
it.
So then on,
So the leader puts off 144 gallons per minute, and that's 0.3.
so, yeah. So the leader itself at 144 gallons per minute is 0.33 CFS. So again, at 0.05 CFS that's coming down from the roof, again, the roof leader is more than enough. On the Bentley Ave side, again, it's just a little bit larger. It's 325 square feet of canopy area. The 100-year storm flow for that minor increase gets this up to 0.06 CFS. Again, the roof leader pipe coming down off of the roof leader, so that the pipe running to the dry well has a capacity of 1.1 CFS, so again, oversized for the roof area. And then ultimately, the dry well design is sized for 250 cubic feet of storage volume, or 1,870 gallons of water that can go into that and infiltrate into the ground. And again, this is 1,870 gallons that would otherwise be going to the combined sewer system that is no longer, or would no longer be going to that combined sewer system.
Instead be going to the street, is what you're saying, or in the case of the northern, sorry. In the case of the northern drainage system going into the well.
Harrison Ave would go to the street.
Right.
Bentley Ave would go into the ground. It would come out of the storage system. So overall, Harrison Ave ultimately, once it gets to the street, it's going to get back into the storm system or the combined storm system. So there's no net change in what water is going to that storm
Understood.
system. On the Bentley Ave side, we're actually pulling it out of the system. So there's a net reduction from the site going into the storm system.
So I don't have a sense of 1,800 gallons for these purposes. I would presume it's adequate, but also I don't want to presume. So can you explain?
Yeah, I'll get into this in a second here too. So more importantly, we met with the Jersey City MUA and they have jurisdiction. They control the combined sewer system within the city. They met with us, as I mentioned before, on February 20th and went through the site with us. And they agreed, it appears that the area ways, the way they're designed and uncovered, that is where the drainage issue is namely a problem. They reviewed our proposed improvements, and they've approved them, and I think I've provided the board, I know I sent it in, but basically correspondence from them that agreed that the proposed design is adequate, and that they basically said we could go ahead and propose or start the construction. Obviously, we would need to get approval from the board here. More importantly, we also went through the Jersey City Stormwater Control Ordinance, so Section 345-74. And this proposed project doesn't disturb more than 5,000 square feet of land or soil disturbance, and therefore it's exempt from the local stormwater control ordinance. So we don't need to do any stormwater control as part of the project. However, within that ordinance, it notes an objective of the ordinance to incorporate low-impact development or green infrastructure devices to allow rainwater to infiltrate into the soil. So again, while this project isn't required to meet the stormwater control ordinance of the city, I think it's doing a very good job of meeting the goals and the objectives of the ordinance by proposing that dry well, by taking 1,800 gallons and 1,870 gallons of water out of that system ultimately and infiltrating it into the ground, providing that green infrastructure that the city is looking for in their stormwater control. So kind of to conclude everything up here, the existing areaways, the drains are undersized, so they can't handle the large storm events, even if they weren't clogged. Routinely, they've been clogged and will continue to get clogged if they're uncovered and the water can just get into that system along with any other debris that's going into that system. And it ultimately will cause another failure and potentially damage to the structure in the future. So we believe the best course of action is to propose these canopies to divert that water from ever getting down to the bottom of that pit and running out on the Harrison Ave side to the street, and then ultimately back into the combined sewer system, and then on the Bentley Ave side to run into a subsurface infiltration pit and then into the ground. So it's not just our opinion, but the JCMUA has also reviewed and approved this. They also went out to the site, and they think it's a good solution, and they've approved it, and they believe this will mitigate the ongoing issue without adversely impacting the city system. That's what I have prepared.
Thank you. Have you utilized these dry wells at other locations?
Yes.
And how does it, I'm a layperson, so how does it disperse the water into the surrounding soil without causing any kind of soil erosion or turning the area into a swamp?
So you're going to bury it at least a foot below the existing grade, and then it's going to be surrounded in a pit of clean stone, and then beyond the clean stone, there's usually a geofabric that prevents soil from getting into the clean stone, and that basically acts as a barrier to allow the water to filtrate out into the subsoil and then ultimately back into the aquifer or the groundwater beneath.
So much like my terracotta chia pet.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just a couple questions. As far as that dry well goes, what's visible from the surface? Is there just a cap on it, or?
The only thing you'd see is similar to like a clean out of a sanitary line where you have like a little PVC rim at the surface that you can open up and look down to make sure it's dry after large storm events, to make sure it's actually infiltrating into the ground. Otherwise, you would see just bare grass or just soil at the surface.
Okay. And the other question I had was regarding the gutter on the canopies. My impression was it's a 1/4 inch per foot grade on that gutter.
Gutter on
That's what they showed.
Yeah, well, I'm going to defer to the gutter on them.
Yeah. So the north canopy is 55 feet, something like that?
The north canopy, the Bentley Ave side,
Yeah.
300, let me get the plan. It's about 60 to 70 feet long on the
Okay.
north side.
And the gutter at 1/4 inch per foot, there's a single leader, so it's going in one direction, would drop over 13.5 inches. 13.75 inches, I calculated at 55.
It's 55, 3 inches.
Yeah,
And
so the gutter would drop 13.75 inches.
I'd have to double check that.
The reason I'm asking is because we looked at a rendering that shows it level. And I know he said that it's on a hinge and it can be lowered, but it's more than a foot. Am I correct?
It does pitch down, and we did actually calculate, there's a dotted line that shows the lowest point of it in the calculation at 2% from one end to the other. So we've done that calculation, and the elevation does show it more or less straight, but the building section that we have through there does show it at its lowest point.
Yeah, I saw the dotted line. I was just taking issue with the rendering that it doesn't seem accurate, because over a foot and change is a significant amount of grade that we would see from.
I'm not convinced that over a 55-foot span, you would
You would notice 13.75 inches?
I don't believe you would see that on the lower end, because the top edge of the canopy is level across. So no, I don't believe I don't think it would be overly noticeable, no. Especially
Okay.
with how close you can get to the canopy.
My issue is that it's not shown in the rendering. That's in the elevation of the rendering.
We can go back, I mean, if you want, I can go back. And
I
look
don't
at
want
it.
you to come back for that. I just wanted to just point that out, because I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that and that was correct.
The gutter is pitched at 2%.
Yes.
We believe that the rendering is an accurate representation of what it would look like. So,
Okay, that was question number 2. And then question number 3 is actually regarding security.
Yeah, then
And,
We're going to hear testimony on that, so why don't you hold that?
oh, okay, sure. That's it.
While we have the engineer in front of us, I have some questions about the existing conditions. You mentioned that there are currently drains at the base of these walkways, and you described, excuse me, the size of those pipes. And I think you said they were 2 inches?
correct.
And those pipes currently connect to the common drains that are in the street?
No, Josh showed it on one of his early slides. They actually run back into the building and then ultimately tie in with the interior sanitary lines that go out to one main
Right.
back into Harrison Ave as one big sanitary sewer connection for the overall building.
Right. So setting aside the concerns of possible leaves or other debris covering the drains,
Correct.
if those pipes were at the right capacity, could they divert the water that was falling into these areaways?
If they were the right size for a short period of time, they could. But again, if it was uncovered, ultimately that debris is going to get right back into the system.
Before let's separate the debris
Right.
for a moment. I'm just talking about the capacity of the engineered plumbing to carry water away from the building. Is it possible for those drains that exist on those walkways to be corrected so that they could carry the proper amount of water away?
They could be corrected, but it would be a very intrusive process. So
Tell us a little bit about that.
So the areaways themselves are at least 5 feet below grade currently.
Right.
So you would have to, for lack of a better term, dig in potentially to rip out those pipes, then go into the structure and chase them into the structure. Ultimately, we're trying to save the historic character of the building. It's going to be very difficult to dig down 5 feet down to where the elevation is and then go down another 2 feet to where the drain pipe is going into the building without potentially adjusting or affecting the facade of that side of the structure.
Okay, so could you, instead of continuing to tap into the drains that you say the rest of the building is, going into the building, could you go out to the street from that location, from those drain locations?
Again, you're going to be digging down, so you're going to be ripping out a retaining wall, and that retaining wall has that historic fence on it. And
Right, but bear with me.
I-
What
yeah.
we're talking of doing instead of that
Right.
is building structures that are coming out off the building
correct.
that are quite long and quite, I know there's different opinions about how they impact the historic structure. But it's, from my point of view as a commissioner, it's a significant structure that's being attached to the building. And if there's a way to correct the drainage invisibly so that it doesn't have any negative effect on a historic structure, then I think that needs to be explored to its fullest before we automatically move to another solution. So I'm not an engineer. I'm just trying to understand what would it take
It's a
to
much,
achieve that.
it's a much more invasive process.
Invasive in terms of digging into the ground and getting to the depth required to set new pipes.
And potentially affecting the structure, yes.
Why would that affect the structure?
Because you're down at the basement elevation, presumably at the foundation elevation of the building. So depending on how you're digging, you could be undermining the structure to get the pipes in.
Okay. We're not talking about digging the full length of the building. We're talking about digging how wide of an area?
Well, if you're just at the bottom of the areaway, I think it was about a 5x5 area.
5x5 area. So,
Chasing it, following the pipes.
right. So there's obviously options. There's going into the building and tying in as it's always tied in to the
Correct.
building. And then there's the alternative to go separately to tie into the city waste lines, right? Or in the case of the well, tie into a well on the church property.
Right. With the exception of the city would, well, the city MUA, we would have to get approved if we were going to propose a new tap into their line.
Understood.
And I don't know if they would necessarily approve that when you have one already
Understood.
going in.
But you could see why, as a historic preservation commissioner, I would want to know that that was exhausted, because obviously that's an invisible solution, as opposed to a solution that could impact how this historic resource is viewed by the public. And my job is to protect the historic structure in any way that my guidelines allow me to.
Right.
So I would like to know that that was exhausted before it.
Again, we looked at that. We looked at potentially upsizing the drains, but we thought being more invasive around the structure was a worse option than having something that potentially could be removed in the future of a canopy that just pushes that water away
Right.
is a better solution.
I also want to address the idea of removal in the future, because I know that's often brought to the commission as reasons why we should accept those options. And the truth is that once a piece of infrastructure like this is added to a building, the likelihood that it's ever going to be removed, that we should look past its impact on the building for the whole time it's going to be in existence. It's really kind of an excuse to allow certain things to take place. It's not coming off the building anytime in our lifetimes, or maybe even our children's lifetimes. So I think the fact that it's removable is not something that gives me any particular peace about making the decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up to Stephen's question about the drains. We're talking about, you're characterizing the replacement of those lines and increasing their capacity as sort of this insurmountable, potentially, impacting the resource. However, in your, letter about the, drainage issues on site, sort of the summary letter, you're talking about the first thing that has to happen is these drains need to be cleaned because they were not maintained properly.
Right.
And second, a CCTV inspection to determine whether anything needed to be replaced. So the recommendation for replacement is already in your report.
And the CCTV has actually happened, and they spoke to it. So that was, when I wrote my report, that hadn't occurred. Since then, and now, the CCTV has occurred.
What did you find, if I may ask?
I believe Josh spoke to it, so.
Okay.
So the pipes in the pathway were in good condition, so they weren't deteriorated in any way, and they were acceptable. Also, the contractor that was doing that work and that we've been talking to about this whole project, we did ask them about the cost of putting in a new drainage system that would meet the requirements that we're meeting here. And I guess to be politically correct, we have kids here. He said it was not possible, okay,
What does that mean?
well, I'll explain. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of additional cost because of the additional excavation that would have to happen at the additional depths, and because of the requirements for stabilization of the structure. So underpinning and similar in order to achieve the same kind of condition. So
So
what we did look into it, but honestly, we didn't feel that, I mean, the contractor basically said it was a non-starter for him, so.
For him, which
What I'm
contractor?
yeah.
Go, please.
Sorry, what I'm hearing is that it is possible logistically and physically.
Order of magnitude, he was talking about roughly an additional $300,000 to $400,000 onto the cost of the project.
Logistically and physically, it could be done.
I suppose,
That's
yes.
what I'm
With any
hearing.
amount of money you could spend on something, then yes, anything can be done. But that doesn't mean that it's realistic within this particular owner's ability.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for the engineer?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to bring up Stuart Portney. Mr. Portney is a congregant of the temple, and he is also, I believe, is it the Safety Task Force? So,
Is a
the Safety Task Force? Is it? Yes.
Raise your right hand, please, sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state spelling for me.
Sure. Stuart Portney, Stuart, P as in Peter, Ortney.
And Mr. Portney, could you, for the record, tell the commission about your affiliation with the Temple Bethel?
Yes. And I'm up here as a lay member of Temple Bethel, like many of you. So I'm here to talk about security and give you some perspective as a security task force member and longtime Temple Bethel member. So I may not be able to answer all your questions, but I certainly want to be able to give you a perspective from a congregant and a longtime resident of Jersey City. I've been a resident in Jersey City for over 35 years. I own and operate a business for over 30 years. I've been a Temple Bethel member for just over 20 years. I've been on the building committee for probably 14 or 15 years, and also a relatively new, although it's not so new anymore, I'm a member with other congregants of Temple Security Task Force. Our responsibility is in these times, and the reason I mentioned that this task force was created 6 or 7 years ago is because it was obviously long before October 7th. And what we were finding as an institution, that it was really becoming important for us to secure our facility, to make it safe for congregants, visitors, obviously worshipers, and other members of the community. We're an institution that was established back in 1926. We presently have over 200 members. We operate year-round. We are open for worship and study. We have services Friday evenings, Saturday mornings, obviously Jewish holidays. During the high holidays, attendance is over between 350 and 400 people. Our religious school operates every Sunday. We have 80-plus students. As I mentioned, we opened 96 years ago, and I'm going to get to this towards the end, but we are very, very concerned about maintaining the architectural and historical integrity of our building in anything that we do. We are stewards. I'm going to say this at the end, but I want to say it now. We take that responsibility extremely seriously. We are stewards of this building because of its history. You know, obviously, our name, our location is extremely prominent. We're on a heavily trafficked county road, JFK Boulevard, at the virtually a block away from the intersection of Communipaw Avenue. We are a highly visible, known institution, and unfortunately a target. You're probably aware, probably the worst news that anyone could receive being a member of this community, despite, no matter what your religious background is the fact that in 2019, Kosher Supermarket, less than a mile away from our temple, okay, was targeted by gunmen, specifically because it was a Jewish market, and 4 people were killed. I mention that date because we had to start thinking about how to secure our facility several years before that. And frankly, there were members of our community and our temple that said one of the first things we had to look at before talking about physically targeting, hardening our facility. I mean, think about that. We have to harden our facilities today. Churches, synagogues, schools, movie theaters. I mean, this is what it's come to. But unfortunately, we are an extremely visible target because of everything that's happening in the world, the increased level of an incidence, again, even before October 7th, of anti-Semitic, not just incidents, but unfortunately violence. So one of the first things that we had to consider as a community, as a temple, was whether or not we were going to have armed security. It was something that we never ever thought that we would have to consider, and that's just one measure now that we do have armed security when we have services, other community events. You know, I think it's important to note that probably for the past 38 years, we've hosted a memorial service annually for Dr. Martin Luther King. It's widely attended by the community, by politicians, by activists, and it's a extraordinarily important commemoration for us as a community. It brings a lot of other people to the temple. And we not only have to protect ourselves, we also need to protect any visitors that come to our home. And you know, unfortunately, this is what it has now come to. So part of my responsibility and other members of the task force, security task force responsibility, has been to sort of learn as we go, and I'm still learning, and work with professionals who have the ability to assess what the threats are to our building. Josh mentioned, and he has in his slides, that there was a vulnerability risk assessment. I'm only going to say that once because I can't say it 3 times fast. I'll just call it risk assessment. That the last one that we did was in March of 2022. The one that was done previously to that was in 2019. These are typically updated every 3 years to stay current. The report was actually done by members of the Union County, Middlesex County, and Hudson County Prosecutor's Office. And I was one of the members of the task force that interfaced with them for those reports. I was also responsible with our security task force in securing the grant funds that we were able to obtain through the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. That's actually another source of FEMA funds. We actually have 2 pots of FEMA money. One is the disaster and mitigation work that we've been talking about, and the other that comes directly through FEMA, and the target hardening and security grants that come through the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. So there are very specific requirements in securing those funds. We've been very fortunate that we've been awarded those funds twice on a very competitive basis. I think that points out how the state sees the level of vulnerability, as that we unfortunately have as an institution, and it's very difficult for me to say that, but unfortunately that's just the way it is. As it relates to this specific application, there are specific recommendations in the risk assessment that, again, Josh, I know highlighted in his slides, but I think it's important to bring out. And there was a whole bunch of other recommendations, some of which we've already undertaken that have no impact on this application, from secure, having controlled access, other interior measures that needed to be strengthened and hardened. But the ones that we're really concerned about right now is the fencing and gates, particularly in the areaways. There were very strong recommendations in the risk assessment that said that they should be at least 6 feet high, if at all possible. They should be locking gates, and wherever gaps exist, they should be eliminated. So that's what really got us here to this portion of the application, was those specific recommendations. Again, this was recommendations of law enforcement professionals that actually did a comprehensive inspection of our facility. And so again, we take those recommendations extremely seriously. I'm going to conclude with what I said before. We think, okay, and when I say we, I'll say me, because I'm up here talking to you, but I know that our members feel the same way, that our design team has done a fantastic job, because we instructed them to make sure that whatever work was going to be done on this building respected the architectural and historic integrity. As I said, because this was an institution that was established 96 years ago, we look at the fact that past congregants, who many of which are no longer with us, okay, took this obligation very seriously to try to continue to maintain this as a Jewish institution in Jersey City, and as somebody that's a current member, I want to make sure that future generations are also going to be able to worship here, enjoy this facility, and what it means to the community, because we're extraordinarily proud of this building, and we do not want to do anything that in any way, shape, or form would violate the integrity of the building. So I'm happy to answer questions. Obviously, I can't answer them as a security expert, but if you have questions about the process and kind of what we went through, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, I just had one question about how you selected the areas that you were going to protect. The areaways you said right now were a priority, and the reason I'm asking is because I was thinking, is this part of a greater idea for more fencing later? Are we going to see other applications? I think that's really what I'm thinking.
No, the you're actually, you've seen the perimeter fencing,
Yeah.
which was part of the around the yard, which was also one of the recommendations, but I understand that's not today's application. So no, this is the other target hardening things that I mentioned are window replacement. Those are door replacement, interior and exterior, none of which is the subject of this application. We're going to be providing additional controlled access. We're probably looking at also changing interior door hardware, okay, that is not properly secured. So it's those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to continue and conclude with Scott Doyle, he's our historic expert.
Raise your right hand if you swear. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks. Your full name and spelling, please.
My full name is Michael Scott Doyle, and MichaelScottDoyle, and I go by Scott.
Go ahead.
I was about to say, Mr. Doyle has previously been qualified as an expert in historic preservation in front of this board before.
Okay, and Mr. Doyle, for the record, are you the author of the heritage report that was submitted in connection with this application?
That is correct, sir, yes.
Okay, so if you could give the commission the benefit of your opinions and conclusions within the report and with regard to what you heard here tonight.
I'd be happy to do so. Thank you, and take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much to the Temple and to Josh for including me in this project. I'm glad to be part of it and provide some insight on our perspective on the proposal. I wanted to go back to the standards for rehabilitation and just focus on that for a minute in relationship to the local guidance that you're reviewing this under as well, as your ordinance includes both of those standards for the review. The standards for rehabilitation are selected because they provide greater latitude than the other standards for preservation or restoration, which allows for alterations and construction of new additions to historic buildings to continue their use. And the most applicable standards for these projects relate to Standard 2, which is the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved, the removal of distinctive materials or alterations of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. And the other one relates to exterior alterations under the new additions that will not destroy materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property, and that the new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historical materials, features, size, scale, and proportion and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. And that's very similar to the local requirements that, and most specifically, the one relating to the awning, which states that these features should be attached to the building in such a way that they do not destroy, conceal from view, or cause irreversible damage to significant architectural features. So there's a really good consistency between your local guidance and the standards. And the part about the awnings is more specific in your guidance related to specific features of buildings and specific projects, which helps property owners with the development and the design of their projects. And in reviewing this, in our report, I cited on page 10, when I look at projects and I look at historic buildings, I often first try to assess the primary and secondary features of a building. And with the temple, obviously, the facade that's facing JFK is the primary elevation. The Harrison Street elevation, I would consider that a primary elevation as well, since it's a corner building and it's a prominent location. It does have, and it carries over the design components from at the first, second, and the roof levels, that those features are all consistent with the primary character of the building and the significant features of the building. And that includes the red brick and a Flemish bond at the first floor, the series of 5 stained glass windows, the belt course of terracotta, all the other terracotta details, and the arch parapet and the dome with the patina cladding and the barrel tile roof tiles. Those are obviously primary features, significant architectural features for the building. At the basement level on the Harrison Street Avenue, that's a recessed, sunken area. It's a secondary feature in the hierarchy of the building. And then if you look at the north elevation along the lawn is much more simplified. It is truly a secondary elevation. The terracotta detailing is terminated at the first section of the building, and then it transitions into the red brick masonry. So it is simplified in its overall design. It still has prominent features like the 5 stained glass windows at the first floor level, and it has the series of 5 arched stained glass windows at the sanctuary level, and the arched parapet with the terracotta detailing. Those are clearly significant character-defining features of that secondary elevation. So when we were looking at this project and assessing the impact of the canopies and the fencing on the overall character of the building, and I go back to the evaluation criteria that's applied by the local guidelines, stating that the feature should not destroy, conceal from view, or cause irreversible damage to the significant architectural features. Our point of view is that these canopies, they're a new feature. There's no denying that. They are inserted on the Harrison elevation. It's visible. On the north elevation, it's slightly less visible due to the setbacks and the vegetation of that elevation that conceals it. But it's been designed to minimize its impact. It's been designed not to destroy the material. It's being proposed to insert the anchoring systems within masonry joints. It may be reversible. It's not intended to be reversible necessarily, but it is being installed in a manner that does not destroy the material of the building. And the features of the building that it's concealing are secondary features at the basement level. Everything above that is, of this building, of the primary features, is fully visible above those canopies and above that fencing. especially when you remove yourself from this, as on this view, looking at the north elevation, my eye is not drawn to that canopy. My eye is drawn to the front elevation of this building. It's drawn to all the terracotta detailing, the stained glass windows, and even when I look at the secondary north elevation, I still see the stained glass windows and the series of arches. I am not focused on that areaway and the canopies that are there, or the fencing that is there. When I was looking at the standards as well, the standards also cite, they have a section on resilience to natural hazards. And there are recommendations there, and this is noted on page 12 of our report, that new adaptive treatments are to be undertaken to prevent or minimize the loss, damage, or destruction of the historic property while retaining and preserving significant features of the overall historic character of its site and setting, failing to evaluate potential impacts of natural hazards or to plan and implement adaptive measures to address possible threats continues to put the historic building at risk. And the concern is that without these measures, the building is still at risk. And that the standards recognize the need for addressing resilience to natural events and climate-related events. And it also includes in the standards on building site, it also addresses security purposes and providing protective fencing and other protective measures for security purposes. And these features have been designed to be as minimally visible and invasive as possible, with performing the required need of which they're intended to do. They're not there to be decorative features. They're designed to be as utilitarian as possible and recede from the overall view. Related to the canopies, again, they're being installed below the first floor windows. And in response to a lot of the comments, when I read the transcripts from the previous meeting, and it appears that a lot of those comments and concerns that were expressed at the previous meeting have been addressed in the design. Josh went through those point by point. There was a lot of concern about whether or not the canopy could perform the required need, and Kelly's overview of that indicated that it is being designed appropriately to meet those needs. It's not being over-designed to add a new visible element to the building, but it's providing the minimum amount of visibility needed to provide this protection. So, in our overall estimation, with recognition of site security requirements and natural resiliency requirements that are outlined in the standards, we feel that this does meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation purposes, and that it is in compliance with your local ordinance. And I'm willing to take any questions or responses. I'm going to step away and get a glass
You had
of
mentioned the spatial characteristics of the property was sort of another standard that was either in our local, it was either our local laws. I didn't necessarily see that addressed in your report about that particular aspect. You talked a lot about the not destroying materials, but what about the spatial characteristics?
Well, within respect to the historic district, it's got a pretty limited impact on the overall character of the historic district. With the building itself, there is a spatial impact in that it does project from the building. It projects the minimum amount needed to fulfill the required purpose. It is not trying to present itself as, it's not trying to exceed its spatial requirements. So within that confine, I feel that it does meet the standards.
Okay, thanks.
Question, I think you made, sorry. I think you made mention of the word additions several times when you were speaking about the Secretary of Interior standards. And I just wanted to clarify your interpretation of additions. I think you're referring to additions as anything that's added on to the exterior of the building. My understanding of additions is when you're adding some type of structure, an additional structure. I just wanted to clarify that.
I
with
would
you.
agree with you. And the issue in Standard 9 is that it starts with new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction. And I'm focusing on the exterior alterations.
Not on the addition
Not
portion.
on the addition. I would agree with you that a structure, a walled system with a roof would be considered a new addition or a structure, that this is an alteration.
Understood. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Agree?
Do we want to take a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, we do typically take one around 8 o'clock.
All right, so it's 8:05. Do you want to come back at 8:10?
Yep.
I feel compelled to remind you to not talk about this on the break.
No, we will not. Thank you.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order.
Okay. Just for the record, it is 8:14.
Okay, so, that completes our presentation, and that being said, our experts are here, available for any further questions from the commission. But I just say, a couple of comments that, I know this commission, this is not a typical application before this board. We're not asking for, a restoration of a building or an extension on a building. We're asking to provide for canopies on the building and fencing. But I do note that these, as Mr. Doyle referred to them as features, I think these features are extremely critical to the ongoing preservation of this building, inside and out. That's why we're here. The Ida storm devastated the building. These are the elements that we want to add to the building to fix that, to try to prevent it from happening and I think as Mr. Doyle and the experts provided, we believe it meets the standards of the Secretary of Interior standards, and we believe that these features are important for the ongoing, as I said, preservation, but it's also for the use and the safety of the synagogue. It's also would be, we believe, a benefit to the community because, the stairwells, you heard the stories, there are unsavory things happening there. That you get rid of that, it helps the community as well as the synagogue. But again, these are things that I believe are critical to the preservation of the building, and we hope you agree that we've met those standards. And with that said, again, our experts are here if you have any further questions for clarifications. Thank you.
Do any commissioners have any further questions of any of the expert testimony you heard this evening?
I have one question. I have one question for Mr. Osich about the numbers, some of the data we were talking about, which was helpful to have. I wrote down, and please correct me if I misunderstood, the 2-inch drains at the areaways, you had said they could carry 0.06 cubic feet per second?
That's correct.
And then in your presentation, on pages 96 and 97, you sort of showed the calculations of what each canopy could carry, which was depending on which one it was 0.05 cubic feet per second and 0.06 cubic feet per second.
Correct. So it's right at that capacity.
So in theory, if the drains are cleaned, they could meet the 100-year storm volume.
Assuming they're clean, but again, it's going to be routine that we're going to have storm events. If they're uncovered, it's ultimately always going to have debris in those pipes and can cause a problem. And again, the proposed canopy is more a diversion of that water, because ultimately, if that thing backs up in a 100-year storm event or an IDA event, and that access way is really an emergency egress, and that thing's backed up, they can't get out of the emergency exit from the basement, and now it's also a safety issue for the people potentially in the building.
Okay, but like, as, you know, but under ideal circumstances,
Under ideal.
for your calculations,
Yeah, under ideal
for
circumstances.
100-year storm. So ideally, in an ideal scenario, in perfect working condition, the current drains, in theory, could carry the 100-year storm volume.
And in perfect conditions,
And
it
that's,
could.
you know, akin to what the canopies are diverting.
Correct.
So then, okay, I just want to make sure I had those numbers correct. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Are there any additional questions? I know we have members of the public here for public comment, so if there are no additional questions, we can move into public comment. And then, of course, we can continue to take any questions after that, if you guys would like to do that. Okay?
Yep, so we can move into public comment, and if there are any members of the public who want to speak on this application, you can approach the podium. And just a reminder that public comment is limited strictly to 3 minutes, so please keep your comments brief, and we'll take them into account and redirect your questions as appropriate. And when you approach the podium, please also state and spell your name.
I am going to correct you. We are using the separate mic rather than the podium in this case.
Ah, okay.
So, first time we've had public comment in the new room for everyone.
Do we need a motion?
We will do a motion in a moment. I will be keeping time on my phone, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning if you're approaching the 3 minutes, okay? So typically we just have everyone line up, but if you'd like to remain seated and just go one after each other, that's also perfectly appropriate. Okay, we can take a motion to open public comment.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so
Good evening. My name is Adelaide Russell.
Can you spell it?
It's spelled Adelaideide, and my last name is spelled Russek.
How long have you been a Temple Bethel member? Since you were 1 year old?
Since I was 1 year, I've been a Temple Bethel member until I was 1 year old.
What would you like to say? What do you do at Temple Bethel?
We want better security.
What do you do there? Do you go to Hebrew school?
We go to Hebrew school, and we wish that we could go downstairs, not just parents. We wish that we could have work downstairs, but we need to do Hebrew school.
That's good, honey.
thank you.
Good evening. My name is. Oh, sure.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your full name for the record.
Megan Dolby Russek. MEGANDOLBEERUSSEK. I am Adelaide's mom. I've been a Temple Bethel member for
2 years.
for several years, for about 5+ years, 6+ years. I wish 5 or 6 foot fences were not necessary in this day and age. I converted to Judaism. I went to church every Sunday, never had a armed security guard in front of my church. But now that my family and I attend Temple Bethel, armed security is necessary, as are fences, as are other, things that we need to sustain the beauty of Temple Bethel. I just want to reiterate that we're open and enjoy all members of the Jersey City community. We also service members of the community through a food pantry every Wednesday that's open to anyone. We don't ask for any kind of identification. If you're in need, you come. So I just want to reiterate to the council here this evening, we appreciate your time, and we just ask for the same kind of security that you all enjoy as a council, that you come into a building with security out front, you have fences around your building, and we would appreciate the same kind of courtesy and security that you can enjoy here. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Adelaide, Adelaide.
Raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Megan, Meagan, Cancio, Cancio. Thank you for your time. May I proceed?
Yeah.
Yes.
My name is Megan Cancio, a West Side resident residing on JFK and Kensington, Temple Bethel member, full-time corporate worker, and my most important job as a mother. I'm here today with my husband and daughter and fellow Temple members. Temple Bethel was part of the reason we moved to the West Side, a place where we can thrive as a family, as a Reformed Jewish mixed race family who believes in Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place. I'm standing here with the plea to please help us out, help make this a safe place for people of any ethnicity, religion, or race to survive. Our fate is in your capable hands. It's Jersey City's duty to protect its people and their cultures, making safety a top priority, especially with a vulnerable population that is dealing with a lot of hate crimes across the country and in the state of New Jersey and in Jersey City. It's not easy being a Jew in this current climate, and it takes courage to even come here and stand up and speak to all of you. We as a temple have hired historical experts. We listened, we acknowledged, we revised designs based on your feedback. Which is pretty tactical. That just goes to show how much we really do care. We did our part by collaborating, actioning on your concerns, and now it's your turn to please approve this. Our congregation is a relatively small one that is only possible by sustaining ourselves with a safe environment.
Our congregation is a relative.
Small one that is only possible by sustaining ourselves with a safe environment and use of a social hall space that doesn't flood. We do not have unlimited funds to pick apart the proposal in every which way. What would happen if our congregation wasn't able to sustain ourselves and not be in this space? You will not find any other group that cares about this building's historical significance than us. We are accountable, considerate. We're keeping the building maintained and afloat. We are protectors of the building, and it's because of us that this building is in as good of a shape as it is. And without us, it would be abandoned and left to rot like other large structures in the area. Hello, big mansion across the street on JFK. Or even worse, torn down for a new modern cheap build, like we've seen across the West Side region. We are lucky as a community to be deeded to this beautiful facility. And also the community is very lucky that we're here to uphold the character of the neighborhood with its magnificence. Help us continue to let our temple be a shining jewel of the neighborhood as the protectors. Don't get caught in the weeds and get distracted with what we're here to do today and our purpose. The circumstance of the location of the synagogue being in a bustling city and a busy intersection near Communipaw makes it extra vulnerable. Anyone who lives near West Side would understand that. I know I'm in this local Facebook community group and I see people posting about it that aren't even members of the temple, such as this one. There are needles and caps to needles spread out in JFK in front of the temple and on their stairs.
You could just wrap it up, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
There's been drug addicts shooting up within the stairs, corridors, children could easily access to pick up a needle. I'll be done in 30 seconds. Anti-Semitic attacks on our temple has occurred, such as vandalism.
Sorry, you're going to have to slow down.
Okay, kind of contradictory. I'm trying. I know, I understand. I know, I understand. Anti-Semitic attacks on our temple has occurred, such as vandalism. There are floods that make the space unusable, susceptible to inhaling unsafe mold for children. To help us protect the Jewish kids of Jersey City by being our ally and making this a usable space to protect the Reformed Jewish community and allow us to have an existence within Jersey City. And we need your help in order to do so, please.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ethan Asher Weil. E-T-H-A-N. E-T-H-A-N. W-E-I-L. I go to Hebrew school. I'm 10 years old, and I just joined this Hebrew school. I used to go to the Hoboken Synagogue, and this year I just joined the synagogue. It's been very fun. I learned a lot of new stuff, and I'm learning Hebrew. My mom is Catholic. My dad is Jewish, and we're very welcomed, and we want to be very safe. We feel the fence will be very helpful. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
comments.
Raise your right hand if you swear. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. Marion Roger, M-A-R-I-O-N, last name R-O-G-E-R.
Marion, Michael's going to come help you with the mic quickly.
E-R.
Yeah.
Thank you. My husband's French. We pronounce it Roger, but it's R-O-G-E-R. I go by Marion Roger. Thank you. I am was one of the most vocal proponents of this particular historic district back in 16 and 17. I spoke down at City Hall when the vote went. I was involved with Jody Drennan and Charlene Burke and everybody when we were trying to get our part of town made into a historic district. As president of the Condo Association of 260 and 270 Harrison, I'm an internal champion. Anytime anybody wants to do anything in our building, I'm like, right there, here's Maggie's email. You got to get a certificate of non-effect, pay your $25. Let's go. You guys have been great. I salute everything you do. And I know that what it's like to be on a committee and a board. So I am semi-retired and I'm a prisoner of my apartment because I work from home. When I'm not working, I'm not doing anything. And I have a dog. So I walk up Harrison Avenue, down west, across JFK, down Bentley, and back. But most of the time I get as far as Bentley, halfway, and turn around and come back. And I probably do that 8 times a day, sadly, because I do it at 7 a.m., I do it around 11, I do it around 1 to move the car, do it around 4, I do it around 7. I meet my husband when he walks home from Journal Square. Sorry, trying to get it all in. You get the point. The reason I came to know Tom Rosensweet and the community at the temple, besides knowing people like Alan Mentha and Barb Wolkoff and some of my other really dear friends who are community members, is because I am the neighborhood pain in the neck nudge, because I got his phone number and I have all the pictures on my phone. I brought them tonight if anybody wants to see them. I would send him a picture every time I'd walk up Harrison, whether it was 7 a.m. or 10 p.m. at night, of various individuals down there defecating, having same men on men, having needles thrown on the sidewalk. I have pictures. I don't have the men on men. But the point is, we have an unsavory neighborhood. due to the fact that that fence was not locked. And he would consistently say, can't lock it because it's an egress and it has to be safe and you have to be able to get out of there. So thankfully it was flooded because they put a lock on it because nobody is going to be in the basement trying to get out. So they were able to put a lock. So we haven't had the degree of, and literally crap that we had there.
30 seconds.
So, you know, I am a big proponent of the fact that you need to have a higher fence if you are going to restore access to that basement for an egress, because you need to be able to make it lockable so that people from the outside can't get down there. And while I can talk about the quality of life and needles and fecal matter and sexual activity, a bad actor could pretend and not be seen because you can't see from the street. If you don't look down there, it's deep enough. Someone could walk down there and place something on the pretense that it's just a shopping bag full of Cocoa Puffs and Yahoo when it's not. And
Wrap
as
up
the
your
fact that
thoughts,
my
please.
father was Jewish and I have a lot of Jewish friends, I think of that just as much as the fecal matter and the needles. So you can do all you want to protect the historic visible, but if that thing blows up, there is nothing left. And I hate to say it like that, but I like to call a spade a spade. The security is super important for all of us in the neighborhood. We all know we live near that target.
All right.
Thank
You for your comments.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do. My name is Jill Kushner, Kushner, no relation to any of the famous Kushners. Want to make that clear. I have been a Temple member, my husband and I, at Bethel for 14 years, since we moved to Jersey City from South Orange. Since I have been a member, I have seen the Temple clergy, staff, and members deal with the building's age and the need for repairs and preservation. If we are really concerned about the historic aspects of this building, remember that the building can be potentially destroyed by both weather events and people. We are asking for help to preserve and protect the building so it can serve us and others today and in the future, because our temple is actually open to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity.
Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And your full name and spelling.
Jeff Kaplowitz, K-A-P-L-O-W-I-T-Z. I'm a lifelong resident of Jersey City. I've served, like you, on many boards, and I still serve on boards. One of the most important boards I've served on was the Jersey City Planning Board as chair. I appreciate everything that you do and the time that you take and reading the stuff, understanding it, listening to it. One of the testimonies tonight, which I found the most important, was a statement that said significant alterations to historic property. And that's what you're concerned about. You also are known as the Historic Preservation Commission. Key word, preservation. That is meaning to save, to preserve, and to make sure that it continues into the future. We are at a point that we have not been able to use our temple for a couple of years for full services. You've heard the children, which is wonderful to hear that children are learning about their religion and their community. The adults who come to services who can no longer break bread at the end of the service because it can't be used. We also know that FEMA gives us a donation, not a grant, to actually fix this building because this building is important. The congregation is important. We know that security is important because Homeland Security gave us a grant. A statistic that I just looked up from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, says that from October 7th to January 1st, 3,278 acts of anti-Semitism. We're living in very, very difficult times. And everybody's subject to these acts of terrorism, because that's what they are. What are we doing here? We're preventing the building from flooding again where it can't be used.
30 seconds.
Just please give me the moment.
Okay.
This awning is not a significant change to the historic aspect of this building. The security, unfortunately, in our lifetimes, moving forward, we have to deal with it. It's important to save a historic building, but the brick and mortar is not as important as the lives of our residents who go to these houses of worship. Also, I know that cost should not come into the aspect of what it means to preserve a building, but it has to. I just found out today the Jesuits of St. Aidan's is giving back the building to the Archdiocese of Newark because they can't maintain the building. We're seeing this throughout our community. The most vulnerable associations, congregations, can't maintain their buildings. We will lose those historic buildings if we go to the absolute bottom of not allowing some small, minor additions to a building.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. My name is Irwin, I-R-W-I-N, Rosen, R-O-S-E-N. First of all, I want to thank the commissioners for sharing their time with us and allowing us this opportunity to present our feelings about Temple Beth-El. And I ask and I implore the commissioners to draw a distinction between historic preservation and historic perfection. Temple Beth-El is one of Jersey City's greatest examples of historic preservation. Founded in 1865, we continue to serve the Jewish community of Jersey City. That's historic preservation. Our current home at Kennedy Boulevard and Harrison Avenue will be 100 years old next year. The cornerstone says 1925. Our doors continue to be open to all who come to pray and to share and to worship and to learn. It's open to our neighbors. We have a weekly food bank that is so important when you see people lined up to enter that building. The importance that we bring, the importance that we serve cannot be overlooked. What we do when we take pride in the building, that we do take a great deal of pride in it, that's historic preservation. If you come and visit us, and if you walk around that building, the exterior or the interior, you will see the level of pride in historic preservation, different than historic perfection. We, against all odds, we've held on to this building, and we keep it, and we maintain it, and we use it. Its doors are open to all who choose to enter. That's historic preservation. In keeping the doors open, we have done a great deal to maintain the splendor of the building. Come visit us, you'll see. But Hurricane Ida devastated us. The ills of urban life are creating a problem also. What we're asking to do is to make a relatively minor change to the exterior of the building that will provide much needed security and also will will allow us to secure the building so that these children and the senior citizens and everybody else will feel comfortable in the building.
30 seconds.
Thank you. The greatest act of historic preservation is not the creation of a monument to the past, which unfortunately we just heard about St. Aidan's. It is recognizing that allowing minor practical exterior alterations will help ensure that Temple Beth El can and will continue as a home to the Jewish community of Jersey City long into the future. And that's the difference between historic preservation and historic perfection. We should not be seeking historic perfection. Let's be happy with historic preservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth?
I do.
And nothing but the truth?
I do. Aaron Brotman, Aaron Brotman. I have been a member of the temple for about 7 years now. I have 2 young children. One is in the Hebrew school, the other soon will be. And I have, I've been a member of the building committee since I joined, and I've been the chair of the security task force since it was founded about 6 years ago. So while Stu is more in the weeds on things like this for the target hardening and the physical aspects of it, I am the synagogue's liaison with JCPD, our private security, JC Public Safety, and the Homeland and Hudson County Sheriff's Office. I also have had a good insight and have seen the numbers, the loss of revenue for not having the social hall space down in the basement. You know, up until Ida, we actually had a weekly tenant of another church. So while we pride ourselves in being a home to the Jewish community of Jersey City, we also are a home to all others and other faiths. So they can use our space to worship as they see fit. What I'm asking you for is to consider the whole of this application and what we really need as a community. So I'm the one who sees the initial calls from our private security folks who tell me, you know, we pulled somebody out of the area way down there who was asleep at 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they were a drug addict. Maybe they were just a homeless person. Maybe they were harmless. Maybe they were looking to hurt someone who pushed people away, who are eyeing the temple in a suspicious way. I'm the one who speaks with Captain Osluski, the West District, and interacts with the Sheriff's Office when there are threats and concerns to the temple. Who's been interacting with them and with JC Public Safety since 10/7. So I understand intimately the need for this need here and this security. And I am invested as many others are in the future of this temple. I'm hoping that the space downstairs becomes classrooms for my daughters and becomes a space where we can welcome another church to use our space on Sunday afternoons so they can worship. And that can be a space where we can have the Kiddush after my daughter's bat mitzvahs. So that is dry and is safe and is welcoming to all, because that is who we are. And as saddened as we are that we've had to have private security the last few years and work more closely with the sheriffs and the JCPD.
30 seconds.
We do believe, and it is our mission, that is who we are, to be open and to be welcoming. And we're looking for help to continue to be so. Thank you.
Thank you.
There. Yeah, I hope it stays.
Me too.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Barbara, Barbara, Wolkoff, Wolkoff. I have been in and around Temple Beth El for about a decade, but I've only been a member for just under a year, because I finally got to the point where I realized that the importance of this community and this building to endure and survive meant that I couldn't just take it for granted, and that I needed to contribute more than just my presence a few times a year. it's an amazing community. It's a welcoming community. You've heard everybody talk about all those things. And while everybody's talked about safety and all of those things, I'm not going to repeat those concerns because we all have those concerns or we wouldn't be here. What I will say is that as sad as it is that we have to talk about the fear that we have from a security standpoint, we have a fear of the building deteriorating. We have a fear now because of Ida that the whole basement, which adds the layers of community that the use of that space adds, are incalculable. And I respect all of you and your time and your commitment and clearly your attention to all of the detail. I'm grateful, even when I disagree, that there's a commission like this. And what I'll say to you is that you have the capacity and the ability to take at least one of the community and congregational fears away by approving this application. Because that would be one less thing we would have to fear, that we would have another flood that would devastate a part of our building and community that means so much to us. So given all the things there are to fear, I ask that you consider that when you consider this proposal, which I've been impressed by all of our experts who I've only met tonight. So thank you very much for your time and your attention to our proposal.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide public comment?
Seeing no one else, I'll make a motion to close public comment.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any additional questions for professionals, or should we move on?
I actually did. I had a
Sure.
I had a couple questions actually. One second, I had written a note. This is for, and I forget the preservation consultant. I'm sorry, I forget your name. It's been a long night. My question is, if you reviewed and you did talk a lot about the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines. I know there is a more recently published in 2021 flood mitigation or flood adaptation guidelines. I was just wondering if you reviewed them or are familiar with them.
The sustainability guidelines, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm familiar with them.
It seems like it's more generally geared towards like ocean and river flooding than it is maybe this particular case, but I think some of the recommendations in there could apply here.
Mhm.
It talks about site and landscape adaptations, which I think that we're kind of mixed on here. It recommends altering the site and setting and location is not critical to the significance of the historic character of the property. I think your testimony talking about especially the north facade being a secondary facade did kind of shed some light onto that. It was a little illuminating for me. But I think one of the things that, and I don't know, perhaps the architect and engineer can talk to this as well, but if any other adaptations like flood shields or anything were looked into, that they could install there as well. I think what I've been struggling with, and this is a question for you or the architect and engineer as well, but has this type of canopy to kind of shield the areaways from rain, have they been successful in other locations? Is this something that's been done and has been successfully done and the rain kept away from the areaways?
Well, traditionally, I see a lot of buildings that have canopies at entrances, a lot of buildings that have canopies at secondary entrances, rail sheds, all sorts of buildings that have exposure have canopy systems and awnings to protect people and buildings from from rain, from torrential downpours and things like that. We often see in buildings that are converted to hotel use that awnings are part of that reuse of the building to provide a drop-off and a departure point and shelter for people coming in and out of the house, out of those buildings. As far as I've seen on residential buildings and secondary elevations of other buildings where there have been awnings over these types of recessed bulkhead basement entrances and things like that. Often they're a lot simpler, they're smaller in scale, and they often use metal brackets with corrugated metal roofing or even kind of translucent plastic corrugated materials. There is a desire to have something a little bit more permanent and a little bit more aesthetically pleasing here, while still being utilitarian in character. So there are utilitarian features. There are spaces that receive these type of utilitarian canopies that I've seen. I know there have been other. Kelly mentioned some other things about the positive drainage of the sidewalk. That would have been something of a site-related thing I would have recommended, but he documented that that still exists. And other features like that to keep rainwater from washing in and going into the area. But the concern is the rainfall now. I'm not sure if there's.
So with the grade, we didn't look at sort of other grade diversion elements. We identified that the water that was coming into here was from above and from impacting the north and south facades and running down. So we identified that that was where the issue was. And in our first conversations with FEMA, the first recommendations with the FEMA team we were meeting with was, can you cover it? Can you box it in? And those were the recommendations from them. And, they were looking for us to divert the water away from this areaway. And, our solution was to put the awning on, in large part because we felt it was going to have the least impact, on the facade, and on the architecture. That was the path we took. Some of the earlier designs we had were fairly substantial, were bigger, took different approaches to the structure. And in reviewing those with some people with SHPO and some people locally, it was, felt that those were going to have greater impact and potentially gave us false sense of history on the building. So we wanted it to be something that was separate, unique, and we believe it is the best path to divert the water.
And is there any regrading on the site? I think one of the reports, maybe by the engineer, did mention some limited regrading, and I'm not sure if that was talked about or not. And maybe talk about that for just a quick moment.
Yeah, so I'll answer first, going back to your flood wall / flood vent, I think you said question. Josh kind of touched on it, but typically those implementations for flood walls or flood vents are near bodies of water that during a storm event, the banks come up and that water is running into a structure. Whereas the issue here is not water coming out of a body of water, it's rainfall going directly into the areaway. So a flood wall on the outside or at the sidewalk is virtually going to do absolutely nothing. So it wouldn't solve the ongoing issue. The regrading on the north side of the temple in the grassed area, I kind of mentioned it originally that the high point of the site is up along Bentley Ave and everything drains towards the southwest. What we're doing is we're in the grassed area, we're also proposing like a minor little drainage ditch to kind of redirect some of that water from going towards the structure and pushing it away from the structure as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sorry, while I was still up.
Any other questions?
I just have a question for you to refresh our memory about the staff level fence.
Sure.
Just to clarify, because it's not part of this proposal, that fence fully encloses Lot 26 where the historic home was demolished, and as well as the side yard of the synagogue, fully to the facade. Is that property fully contained with the fence?
So
With the fence, like by the fence?
so that fence application was approved under a certificate of no effect. That fence stretches from the side of the building around the block but it does not fully enclose the property with just that fence. There is a neighboring fence on an adjacent lot, the first property on Bentley, where they reach to their fence, and that property owner's fence goes the remainder of the property line to the adjacent building.
In reality, the full grass area is enclosed.
In reality, the full grass area is enclosed,
And
yes.
we could consider the fence at the north areaway as a redundancy.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, for, like, just to clarify further, if the applicant wanted to continue their fence and have two fences against each other, that would be fine. They chose not to because, as is standard with fences, when someone else has a fence there, you generally just put your fence up against it and you rely on their fence to enclose your property. Are there any other questions for any of the witnesses tonight? If not, we can move into staff comments. Okay. Chuck, I know you did some closing remarks. Anything else you want to close with, or just jump? You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay. Don't want to make you get up if you don't have to. Okay. All right, so we can move into staff comments. You all received a revised staff report. Admittedly, we did not spend too much time revising the staff report because the documents that were requested by the commission after the last hearing, not that they did not necessarily impact the staff report, but they were items that we could discuss as a commission after hearing testimony, and did not change the bulk of the staff recommendations, which in this case, there were two sets of recommendations. There were recommendations on how, if the commission thought this was an adverse effect, the commission could deny the applications, or if the commission thought that there was not an adverse effect, they could approve. So we did not change those recommendations because they didn't need to be changed based on the documents that were submitted. However, following testimony, there's a couple of things I just want to raise as discussion points, because at this point, I do believe that that's what this is, right? It's a discussion for the level of intervention that we believe that this building requires and how it fits in with our existing standards, and if it's something that we can approve under our existing standards. So the first is that Stephen, I know there was a lot of testimony back and forth about what else could be done to the drainage system of this building and why the canopies were there. And I agree with you. I would have, from a staff perspective, preferred to see the drainage of the building be the first thing that was addressed. That we always try to go for the least amount of intervention. That being said, though, one of the things I look at with the canopies as a potential positive for the canopies comparatively to altering the drainage for the system is, with the increasing amount of storms and the degree of those storms, altering the canopies in the future to accommodate those storms would be a lot easier than altering the building for a second time. It's something that I was thinking about during testimony, where each time we talk about a 100-year storm, the frequency of those 100-year storms is increasing. So if the alterations that they're proposing here allow us to better adapt in the future than making changes to the building, that might actually be a better recourse than changing the drainage system for the building. It's not something that we typically see as a commission. It's something that I think we're going to see a lot of in the future, and it's also something that our guidelines really don't do a great job of addressing. I know that's one of the things in our master plan element that we'll see next meeting. One of the recommendations is to make our guidelines more friendly towards these adaptations. But it's just something to think about, where the least amount of intervention right now, which would be, or the most consistent with our existing guidelines, would be to alter the actual building. Is that the best option for the future? And then the second point that I wanted to make is, within Scott's report, the Heritage report, he actually cites the same set of standards that I do, that I say you could deny it under, that he says you could approve it under, which is that the staff opinion is that while the staff opinion is that the addition of the canopies really does alter the historic fabric, as it alters the way you view the building. And Scott's interpretation was that the bulk of the historic fabric, the primary historic fabric, is all above these canopies, and the canopies isn't altering any of those. And the reality is those are just two competing perspectives. I do not professionally believe that either one of us is wrong. It's just two different opinions, and that doesn't make your job easier. I just want to note. I just want to note that that's kind of the reality of this application, is that there are a lot of components of this application that are not something that we typically see, not something that might neatly fit into our guidelines as we're used to. It's just the degree of adverse effect that we are willing to accept for this building to address some of the realities of this building. In the last meeting, I had expressed some concerns about the fencing. I do believe that the changes that the applicant made to the fencing, specifically lowering it on the Bentley Avenue side and creating more of a visual gap there, do help that. They don't alleviate all of it, but it does help. And I am, based on the updated documents, less convinced of the degree of adverse effect that the fencing installation will cause. So those are my primary updates to the, I'm sorry, I do have a couple more primary updates to the staff report. So that discusses kind of some of the earlier part of the staff report. I do just want to address one change to the staff report. In the second portion, where we talk about if the HPC does approve this application or both applications, we do want to note that condition 3, where we had said there are no lights in the canopy, we have updated that condition to reflect that there are lights in the canopy. The lights are appropriate. They are downcast, which is generally the only condition that we'll put on lights. So I do just want to note for the record that that condition would be eliminated. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'm confused now.
I'm sorry.
So are you recommending approval or denial of the application?
I am saying that I think the commission could relatively easily approve the fence. And I think that we can have a discussion about the canopy. And the staff recommendation for the canopy is that there is two equally relevant professional opinions on it. And it is your duty as commissioners to assess those opinions and make a determination on it.
So, Maggie, if the canopies would interfere with significant architectural features but are required in order to preserve the building, then how do we resolve that concern? Because we don't want to sacrifice the entire structure in order to avoid putting canopies on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why we decide if it's appropriate, and appropriate can be subjective.
So I think the other piece of the analysis is, are the canopies really necessary to prevent a flood event from causing severe damage to the structure? And I know that we had spent quite a bit of time exploring one of the alternatives. I mean, do you have any opinion on that?
My opinion on, well, first of all, I would like to note for the record, I'm not an engineer, so I simply have to go on the figures that they've provided to this commission. I think that they do balance out. I think that it makes what they're proposing makes sense. I also acknowledge that, I mean, as much as any of you walking down the street, you can talk about keeping drains clean. That it just doesn't happen in reality unless you quite literally have someone going out there. And to be fair, it's not, keeping a drain clean is not as simple as having someone go out to the drain once a day and sweeping it, right? It's the important part of keeping the drain clean is keeping the drain clean during the storm event.
Well,
right?
and the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and here, even though on paper those pipes could theoretically accommodate a storm, they didn't during Ida. So we know what can happen if some kind of action isn't taken to address this.
So again, the task before the commission this evening is do the installation of these canopies, which the applicant is saying will prevent future harm to the building. Can we reconcile the appropriateness with future harm to the building, understanding that these canopies meet or are stated to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards? They might not, in the city staff's opinion, meet all the sections of our ordinance. Can we reconcile that into believing that they are an appropriate installation for the building.
One of the things that I'm thinking of now is that, one of the first things in the Secretary of the Interior standards is that a building should be used for its originally intended purpose. It's so rare to see a religious structure anymore being used for its original purpose. We've approved a lot of condo conversions recently of a lot of churches downtown, St. Bridget's. I can list them all, but I don't know them all off the top of my head.
Henry.
Yeah.
Bethesda Baptist.
First Street, Pavonia, Montgomery Street. We've allowed interventions on all of those buildings in the change of use. This is a significant intervention. I know a lot of people who said this is a minor change. I think that's part of what we're struggling here, is that I think we all think this is a significant intervention in this building. But I was struck by Scott. Yes. I was struck by Scott in his testimony in saying how, and it's one of the things, this image that's up behind us and on our screens now, is that I am drawn up on this building when I look at it across the street and from the other view that we're seeing looking south. I'm struck to the parapet, to the dome, to the upper floors of the building, and that this canopy is mainly going to be covering brick masonry, which there's a lot of on this building, and it's not going to be covering terracotta. So I think that's a lot of positives that it has going for it. I still don't know that this is exactly the best strategy for it, but it's what's in front of us. The fencing, I think Maggie said, I was always kind of okay with it on the Harrison side. I think on the other side, agreed the reduction by a foot has helped it. I still think steel would be better than whatever is proposed, aluminum. So I think that would help. Us experiencing as you walk by it a better, stronger material. And there are a lot of buildings with canopies on them. The placement is odd, and I think that's we're struggling with. The placement is odd, and usually you see them over primary entrances, hotels, apartment buildings, secondary entrances sometimes. I think the other thing too that I'm thinking of is that is it a design defect that there are these areaways there? And there are these large facades where in the original design of the building, should they have never have put an areaway there because it's going to lead to flooding? I don't know if Ida was the first time it ever flooded, but you have these large unbroken facades above, all the water rushes down and collects down there. Is this kind of a trade-off for what maybe shouldn't be a sunken areaway there?
That was one of the things that I was thinking about as reviewing this application, is if we were taking the flooding part out of it, if we were treating this as a different way of enclosing this egress stair and Harrison Ave side, would a brick addition to enclose that area be more or less palatable and have less of an impact on this building? And I think that would be worse than what they're proposing here. I think that would be a larger intervention than what is being proposed. And that's kind of where I mentally settled with, is this the least amount of impact based on what they're at? Like, of course, the applicant did not come to me proposing that, by the way. That was just something circling in my head, right? Like, what happens if we stick a box on the side of this? Does that solve their problems? No, it doesn't. I'm not going to bring it up, but here I am bringing it up. So I get what you're saying, where it is a solution to a problem. It's the solution that's in front of us.
And this is a big building. This is a really big building. So I think as part of it, sometimes you look at these interventions and you say, can a building take this intervention? And there can be differing opinions, but I think I think part of it is you say this building is really kind of massive, especially in this view. If your screen's still on behind us or in front of us, and maybe it's the rendering, maybe it's they're giving us the least obtrusive rendering that they can give us, but I think considering all the other facade, the square footage of the building, the amount of brick masonry that it's going to be behind, I think this is a building that can take this intervention. I still don't think it's ideal, and I think the placement of it is what we've really struggled with this whole time. It just seems kind of off in a way, but
I would say few of these applications are ideal or what we would want in a perfect world. But again, Commissioner Blazak, I think you were right to point out that this is what's before us. And I think we heard a member of the public, Mr. Rosen, if I'm not mistaken, talk about the perfect. And I think that a couple of the commissioners asked some very good probing questions about alternative ways of ameliorating the flooding issue. And I think it was important that we explore that and that we undertake that exploration as a commission to discharge our obligations. But having explored that, while we don't take financial hardship into account, I think we also are bound to take the application as we find it. And where the alternative is not really practicable, I don't really think that it's necessary to go there. It seems like there's a general consensus based on the expert testimony by the civil engineer and all the application submissions that some sort of intervention is needed here. It's just a question of what it is. And really the question for the commission is, does this satisfy the design, the historic preservation standards? And it seems to me, taking certificate of appropriateness at face value, this is appropriate.
Yeah. I have to disagree on a number of points. This is the last application I would choose to deny. Given all the issues at hand, it makes it extremely difficult. But at the same time, I have to look at the building, the significance of it. There's been plenty of testimony minimizing the effect of what the canopy and the fence will have on the building, but in essence, they create two sheds. Visually, you're going to have a shed on the south side of the building that's created by the tall fencing and the canopy. It completely interrupts the horizontal base of the structure. And I don't agree that the horizontal base is less important than the windows or less important than other parts of the building. It's critical to the foundation and everything that comes above it. And please understand where my comments are coming from. I don't mean to be unempathetic to all the issues that were raised, but as a commissioner, I have to look at the guidelines. I have to look at how we've carried out the guidelines in the past. As much as I'd like to have my decision based on financial issues, safety, and all the things that have been mentioned in this room that are extremely important issues, I can't make my decision based on that. And the other thing that makes our jobs complicated is other agencies are making recommendations on their guidelines and their parameters. So if FEMA says put a cover over it, that's what's best for them. It doesn't make our job as historic preservation commissioners any easier, because it's certainly not the best solution for us. And we brought up the issue of solving the drainage problem at its source. And I don't believe that that was completely resolved. I heard that one contractor said it would be very difficult and expensive. Well, contractors say things for all kinds of reasons. So I understand that this is difficult, and I understand that it would be easier to approve this application, but but I have to go with my conscience and what my understanding of the historic preservation guidelines are. And I feel that we continue to take other considerations into as almost more important. We can't operate as the least important agency. We have to operate as an agency with commitment to our guidelines and to what we think is correct. And as much as that pains me to say, and I take no pleasure in taking this position, I have to go with what I feel is correct. And we're not depriving the synagogue of all of the things that it offers and provides to the community. There are other solutions to these problems. This is not the only solution to the problem.
I'll say that I agree with my fellow commissioner. I do feel this application is essentially adding 2 sheds, or, it may as well be 2 enlargements or 2 additional enclosures. If this was a glass box, maybe that would be a little bit more, appetizing and a little more appealing to the eye, and would actually solve the flooding problem, because now it's a full enclosure. In my mind, areaways always flood. It's just like a bucket float, sitting out there waiting for water to collect into it. There are many ways that you can get water out of a bucket. The same way there are many ways you can get water out of an areaway. I'm also not an engineer, but in my mind, have they considered a sump pump that pumps the water out of the areaway using the same drainage mechanism that crosses over the street and into the the main sewer line? And I guess for the north side of the building, the fence that was approved, you already have an enclosure there that provides security. Why do you need the redundancy of a lower fence in front of an existing fence?
Well, I'd say maybe just for the fencing. I don't think there's any. I think part of the fencing too is the addition of like the panic buttons and that as well. So I think that gives an extra level of security that the existing exterior fence doesn't give. So I think that's maybe the one difference in terms of that extra fence around the existing areaways.
And also what the activities that they've seen going on there. I mean, the kind of activities that they're talking about, people doing drugs, people going to the bathroom, people having sex, they're not going to have in that open area that's fenced in. That's why they want that specific fence there at that point. I think that, and look, this isn't perfect. It's not, but these problems aren't perfect either, right? I mean, we're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with, a rise in homelessness and crime and things like that, and attacks, unfortunately, driven by anti-Semitism. And so we're trying to deal with them. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it's an improvement.
I have to add that, these problems that the synagogue is having, we're all facing the same problems. We deal with it on a daily basis. We deal with flooding, how to resolve drainage, how to solve crime issues that are happening on our streets. I mean, if anyone owns a home or lives in a building, the same issues exist throughout the city. What do we do when a resident comes and said, I need to enclose my front yard because I can't stop illegal behavior from taking place in my front yard? What do we do then? So I think there's limits to what historic preservation can be asked to do as a commission. We can't take on all of the issues and be asked then to resolve all the issues. I mean, it's not our job to resolve all those issues. As much as I feel for them, the Historic Preservation Commission has a job to do, which is to protect the building and keep the building's integrity, have materials be compatible, and to find solutions that don't affect the building before we accept solutions that do affect the building.
So,
Are we at an impasse, or is there some way that we can say that commissioners could say, these are the things that I take issue with? I don't want penetrations of the building. I don't want blah, blah, blah. Because if, let's say, for instance, the awning was done in a way that it didn't touch the building, What if it was just adjacent to the building? What if it was a couple inches from the building but wasn't actually touching it? Would that affect commissioners' opinions, or would, I would point to, and I was just remembering when we were talking about this, and as a mitigation effort, was the West Side Avenue Charter School building. If any of you remember that, we allowed 20 downspouts, some of
Yes.
them over 8 inches in diameter,
Yes.
that ran the entire height of the building,
Yes.
all the way around the entire perimeter.
I do just want to clarify that was Learning Community Charter School on the boulevard a couple blocks up from this.
Okay, yeah. And we
Right.
permitted,
Another one of the more painful applications we've ever heard.
but
Apparently,
but
all of our
that
issues are
was-
drainage
That was
issues.
that was incredibly, high profile.
No question.
Every bit of it. In my opinion, this is much, much lower profile. If we're just going to talk about what's been permitted in the past, I would
This
say,
is a much higher level of design than that was.
yeah, I would say that I take much, much less issue with two applications that are probably approaching a problem in a way that I probably wouldn't myself. I would do it another way, but as Brian said before, and I agree with that this is the application we have before us.
Right.
It's just 2 awnings. I mean, I can think of how many buildings we've allowed awnings on, how many storefronts we've allowed awnings on. And I would say, as far as I'm concerned, if it solves the problem and it's reversible, albeit maybe, as you had said before, Steve, it's likely never to be reversed.
Correct.
However, it is in, as a preservation expert testified before us, it is in the least part of the significance of the structure. And it is a mitigating structure to solve a problem that in other ways maybe wouldn't be solved. As Maggie had said herself, what if we have 100-year storms every year?
Which
And
it's, I mean, we're trending that way, if not
Yeah.
currently happening.
Maybe it is, something that we're going to look back on and say, wow, we should have said that was all right. I think of that charter school. Now, it's a few blocks from here.
It is, yes. And I
And
do
we
just want
we
to,
permitted that.
we also,
I can hardly say myself that I could say that I think I was the only one that voted against it.
I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I agree that was not a fun
So
one.
I would say it was not something that I wanted to see. And, and now I have to see it when I drive down the boulevard. So this one, when I look at that photograph from, even close up, I still don't really see those sheds. I don't really see them. So I feel like it's something I could vote to approve.
So I don't know if this is the right metaphor, but the phrase like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic comes to mind when, we're talking about trying to avoid affecting the way that the building reads or the appearance of these canopies, creating this shed-like appearance. I don't view this as us intervening or interceding to help them with this problem. I kind of see it as stepping out of the way and letting them resolve the issue themselves. I mean, they're undertaking this massive effort and expense in this sincere effort to preserve the building, and we've heard some real kind of emotional testimony. We've had families come out and speak about trying to preserve this important historic resource, and I can't help but think in this increasingly digital age when everyone's hiding behind their phones, these are people who are going out into the world. They're doing, as Commissioner Blazak pointed out, the best possible use for a historic structure like this is its original use, and they're going there and they're doing that, and they're bringing other members of the community into there, and they're feeding their neighbors and those who are in need. And not to be just sort of emotive about it, but to hone in a bit on our historic design standards, the prefatory language does provide some general standards, and it refers to, every reasonable effort being used to provide a compatible use, and every reasonable effort being made to protect and preserve archaeological resources. So again, I feel like all of this is being undertaken out of a good faith effort to preserve a historic structure and keep it being used for its original purpose, and that's worth doing.
I think about St. John's, and you know,
You
think
just
about
tor-
St.
you're
John's.
just torturing us.
Oh, can I also suggest that if we are at an impasse, that maybe we try to hone in on one of the applications and take them in turn and see if we can reach an, plurality on at least maybe the fences. That seems a bit less controversial.
That was going to be my recommendation, is maybe we talk about the fences first. And if there are commissioners who have outstanding concerns with the fences, I mean, I'm in a position where where I believe I can make a recommendation for approval on the fences with conditions. If there are, of course, I'm happy to talk through any concerns. In terms of when we talk about like impact on the building and installations on the building, a fence is kind of as low stakes as it gets. I know, Stephen, you were concerned about, will things put in place actually be reversed? Fences come down pretty often. I'm not, right, like in terms of long-term impact to the building, I think that of the two in front of us, the fences is significantly, it's not as big of a deal as the canopies.
It's hard for me to separate, and I'll tell you
I
why.
agree with
because
you.
we're asked to look at this in the total impact. There's some specific issues that I'm trying to square in my own mind, and that is the fence that's being proposed covers over existing historic fence, right? It's going to exist behind it. I can't recall when we've ever agreed that that would be an acceptable solution. So, I'm struggling. I would love to approve all of it, but I'm struggling with my ability to justify what's happening. If we're talking about something that could be reversed, why isn't temporary fencing being considered as an option? This is going to be a fairly permanent piece of infrastructure that's, as I pointed out, never going away anytime soon. If there's a current need, then address the current need. That would be easy for the commission to approve. But given its permanency, it makes it so much more difficult for me. And I say me because I'm a commissioner. Just what I think isn't necessarily how this is going to go, but I'm letting the commission know where I stand about it, why it's so difficult.
If it was a temporary fence, would you want the design changed? I'm squaring in my head what a temporary fence, because a temporary fence to me is a
Possibly.
construction fence.
I'm sorry?
A temporary fence to me is a construction fence.
Obviously,
And I recognize that that's like the other end of the spectrum, right? But the definition of temporary is forever minus a day, right? Like temporary, unless you put a specific time period on it. So when you talk about a temporary fence, what does that look like?
Well,
Because maybe that might be something that.
I didn't take the thought that
Yeah,
far.
then that's
the
fine.
idea that this is not affecting the building and could be easily removed made me think, well, then why isn't it? Why isn't a temporary fence being an option? I didn't think through
That
what the
makes
design
sense.
of that fence would be or how it should be implemented.
Right.
But it's one of the concerns. On the north end, the fact that it's behind an already approved fence also feels, we're all about as little as possible. That seems to be what our mission is. So in that case, it seems like, not for me to say overkill. This is people trying to feel safe. So I understand that. It's not for me to say it's safe enough. But I have, as a historic preservation commissioner, I have to look at what's appropriate from that perspective. It makes it very difficult.
And I've always felt keeping the existing fence there while putting the other fence in front of it was an odd. I remember that from last time. I thought that was odd. They did offer to paint them both the same color, which I think helps. But in the report, it says, in an effort to reduce the cluttered or haphazard appearance of the new fence and historic gargoyle, both will be painted black. But I still think it's a little haphazard. I can't think of any situation where you have two fences right next to one another
We
like
did it
that.
at the reservoir.
US
That's the
Capitol.
only one I can think of.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
US
What did you,
the
we-
White House, U.S. Capitol, all over Washington, D.C.
Maggie? What did you say?
We did it at the reservoir, which I recognize you haven't seen yet because you can't.
You can't, yeah.
Hopefully soon. But that's and I agree with you. It's clunky. But it's one of those for my purposes for this, because we are adding so much to the building. I didn't want to combine adding things to the building while also removing historic fabric.
So you asked the question about a temporary fence, and I think Vice Chairman Gucciardo at the last meeting where we discussed this application said that if we had an aluminum fence, it would fall apart in 10 years. So if we just let them build the aluminum fence they wanted in the first place, that's temporary.
Modern materials. Yeah,
Falling apart doesn't mean that it goes away. It just stays there in disarray.
yeah. Anyone else have any comments, concerns about the fence? I mean, we can also do an informal poll before
Yeah.
voting if we want to.
I think that would be helpful for the fence.
Okay. If you think you're in a position to approve the fence, do you want to just give a light hand raise?
With conditions?
With conditions, yeah. Okay.
Just in general.
All right. So we do have enough votes for the fence to pass. Janelle, were there any conditions outside of what's in the staff report that you would like to consider?
I think last time we talked about just that it needed to be. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I think I don't remember what the conditions were, but last time we talked about the materiality, that it not be aluminum, so that the two fences that are going to be sandwiched together are like maintained the same. Like they're finished the same. They're both metal. They're both painted. They're both wrought iron, so that we don't see the like aluminum fence aging at a more rapid rate than the steel, the wrought iron.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Zinder, did you say wrought iron?
That's what the information we have from the contractors, that the actual material is technically wrought iron as opposed to steel. I can't say what the difference is, but wrought iron rails, the existing ones are wrought iron, so they've certainly lasted for close to 100 years already.
I think the question whether it's aluminum or wrought iron, right? I think what's being proposed is an aluminum fence, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I think there's a consensus aluminum wouldn't fly, but I'll leave it to
I
the
believe I
others.
stated earlier that if switching the materiality of the fence would allow for the approval of the fence, then we'll switch the materiality of the fence.
Yeah, and maybe in the conditions we just leave it as iron because I feel like it's probably cast iron, not wrought iron.
It's going to be
But-
solid
Yeah.
steel.
Yeah,
It's going to be solid steel picket, right? The same pattern, the way it is now. You
It'll
want
be the same pattern as it is now.
The same pattern, but steel,
Yes. Iron, yes.
solid, not hollow steel.
Not hollow.
Can we maybe phrase that as iron and/or steel at the determination of the contractor after working with HPC staff?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And where do we stand on the painting of the existing historic fence?
Well, if it's gonna stay, it should be painted black
Okay.
or the same color as the steel or new iron fence.
Okay. Okay, so in that case, the conditions on this would be, the conditions in the staff report to revise the areaway fencing material to be iron or steel at the determination of the contractor after working with HPC staff, and for the historic fence that is remaining on site to be painted to match the new fence.
And the proposal is still both areaways.
Yes.
Sorry, the proposal is still for both areaways. Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Chuck, do you guys, this would be, so we're hoping to vote on one now, and then we can continue talking about the canopy. So this would be on the fencing application 0184. with the conditions that I read into the record?
Those conditions would be acceptable.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the fence application with the conditions as set forth by staff.
Second.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Sandcamp?
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther?
Nay.
Okay. This is for the fencing. Okay.
Do we need a citation or?
Yes, we do need a citation.
So just to clarify, the condition is we are not reducing the number of areaways. It's still both areaways.
It is still both areaways, yes.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, just if you wouldn't mind the staff report here. I
Fencing.
have a copy, or Stephen does as well.
It's all under fencing.
Yes, I see that. I'm trying to figure out, do I need to read both of them or pick one?
You can cite both. You can cite one.
I think I'm going to cite section 345-71 H2I, continuity in visual imagery of appurtenances.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Lewis?
Nay. And I also cite 34571 H2I and H2A.
Okay. Commissioner Blazak?
I'll vote aye.
Okay. Commissioner Cronin?
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Amatuzo is absent. Commissioner Garriga is absent. Commissioner Sakong is absent. Vice Chair Gucciardo?
Yes, I'll vote nay on 345-71 H2I and H2A.
I and A. And Chairman Gordon?
Aye.
Okay. So there are 4 votes in favor and 3 nays. 5 affirmative votes are needed to approve a certificate of appropriateness, so the vote on approving this fails. Do we want to flip the motion so in the past when we have not approved a COA based on numbers, we have sometimes reversed the vote and someone has made a motion to deny it?
Would the applicant be interested in pursuing the application for a fence only on the southern side of the building? We might have enough support for that. Would anyone flip their vote?
I would agree to that too.
All right, so that's it then.
Okay. Well, no, we
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, no, Chuck, that's, do you want? All right. Chuck, do you want 5 minutes? We can take a break.
Yeah, if that's still an alternative, if we could just have the fence on the street side and eliminate the interior on the north side, that would be something that we would ask this board to vote on.
Okay.
And then move a locking gate for the north side to the perimeter fence.
Well, we're going to have to figure that out, yeah.
So that could be reviewed with staff, just
Yes.
the location of the gate and how it would function.
Right.
And that's something, Maggie, you'd be comfortable with working with them on, and that's something you could.
Yeah, I would. We can definitely approve that at the staff level. I think that's something that we regularly approve under certificates of no effect within the historic districts all the time alongside the sides of people's buildings. Again, this came up in the previous hearing. The only time you really see a 6-foot high fence in someone's front yard is when it's adjacent to their building leading to their backyard, and we approve. I'm sorry. And we approve 6-foot high gates in that case, so I would see this as a similar application of that. And it's something that I could approve at the staff level after working with the applicant.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues we're going to have to review is whether that exterior fence on the north side at the perimeter is secure enough all the way around. Because I think at points it's a neighbor's fence that completes it. So we're essentially relying upon the neighbor and their maintenance of their fence. So that's something that we'd have to review and maybe review with staff further as well.
And I think that's something that we said last time that Maggie could approve extending it against the neighbor's fence as well. So
Yes. Okay. So
Does that give us the votes we need? Yeah.
Okay. So again, the conditions on this would be the conditions in the staff report, to paint the historic fence to match the new fence, to revise the material of the areaway fencing, and to eliminate the fence on the north side of the building.
I'll make a motion
Second.
with those conditions.
Okay, I have Kelly. All right. Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
Commissioner Blazak.
Aye.
Commissioner Cronin.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandkamp.
Aye.
Commissioner Amatuzo is absent. Commissioner Garriga is absent. Commissioner Sakong is absent. Vice Chair Gutierrez.
Nay for 345, 71H2I and 71 H2A.
Okay. And Chairman Gordon.
Aye.
Okay, there's 6 votes in favor, 1 against, no abstentions. The certificate of appropriateness for H-23-0184 is approved. Okay, should we go back to the canopies?
Yeah, I feel that there's 3 commissioners who were a definite no on the canopies. So, seeing what happened, and it's up to Chuck. He's the attorney, but it doesn't seem like there's the 5 yes votes.
Can they only put up one canopy?
I don't know if that helps the
It's
issue.
a joke, folks. Just a joke.
So, I don't know if the applicant has any thoughts on that, since doesn't appear to be enough votes for a yes vote at this time.
Yeah, and if I could then, because I'm kind of reading through the tea leaves here, then if I could request to adjourn to another meeting for a vote before the full commission of 9 members.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I would suggest before we get to that is there anything for the tentative nays that could, be a game changer?
Right.
Or is it the whole thing is just not acceptable? Okay. Proceed.
Okay. So I would recommend we'll carry to a date unspecified.
Understood.
It wouldn't, I mean, we're here because you didn't want to be in April, so it's not going to be in April. But we can work together and figure out a date that will have more commissioners available.
Oh, quick
Okay.
question. Is the issue of the fences, that's been settled?
Fences are
Okay,
settled.
and we're only talking canopies.
We're only talking canopies. Yep.
Just making sure we bring that up again with the new, when everyone's back, so.
Right. And
I don't think there's likely to be much more testimony. So
I was about to say if the applicant chooses to carry and does not provide additional documentation or does not choose to reopen testimony, it quite literally will be a brief appearance by Chuck saying, please vote on this.
Yeah, just the commissioners who are not present tonight would have to read the transcript.
And I also would just like to note for the public as well, without reopening testimony or without the reintroduction of new materials, that does mean that the public comment period on this application is also closed. If there are new materials introduced, we would reopen public comment. Okay. Anyone want to make a motion to carry to a date uncertain?
I'll make a motion to carry to a date uncertain at the applicant's request.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is an unidentified speaker, unsworn.
I'm sorry?
I
Let me
think, yeah. Just,
It sounds like the person from the public is asking if there's mitigating circumstances that might help for the next meeting.
yeah, we can see if Chuck would like to relay any of the conversation with his client.
I guess in general, it's, the question is similar to the chair's comment. Is there anything, comments, recommendations that the commission may have for us to look into to make the canopies more palatable between now and the next meeting? My client is, looking to work with the commission, continuing to work with the commission, and that's what we're asking. If there's any guidance, any comments, we're open to them before we leave tonight.
So I could say that the issue of resolving the problem with the current drains has not been sufficiently addressed for me to vote yes on the canopies. There's so many open issues there. I still strongly believe that the drainage could be resolved without the canopies. And believing that, it's hard for me to vote for them. So there'd have to be some new testimony that made it extremely clear that there was no way to go forward in the other direction. I'm not sure what that testimony would be that would convince me, but that's my issue. That was not pursued as a solution strongly enough for me to be able to support the canopy.
Okay.
And I
thank
would
you.
agree that I have the same concern that, the canopies may not actually mitigate the flooding concern. I think it'll help a little, but I don't think it's going to fully mitigate it.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
And I would say I am on the yes side, but I think something that would convince me if I were a no would be to show examples of where this has worked and precedent examples at other institutional buildings. I think that would help.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. All right, because this is a special meeting, the only thing left on the agenda is adjournment.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, it is 9:48 p.m. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.